live button over there on Open Broadcast Studio, which means we're waiting for the stream to fire up across the internet. If you're not familiar with the program, we do multi-stream. We're on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, but YouTube always takes a quick minute to get the stream moving and grooving, and it looks like things are now live. Let me just double check. It looks like we're good. So let's get started. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney over here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful, sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. We help them navigate the criminal justice system, and over our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with that very justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have problems with prosecutors. We have judges not particularly interested in a thing called justice, and it all starts with the politicians, the ones on the top, the people who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of a difficulty doing so themselves. That's why we started this program called Watching the Watchers, so that together we can shine the big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon that very system, with the hope of encouraging some meaningful change. And that's why we're so grateful that you are here with us today. We are going to be getting into a lot of stuff. This is a packed show, so I want to give you a little bit of an outline of what we're about to dive into. So as we were getting into this last night, we learned that Donald Trump issued a new statement that was going to be sort of objecting to the COVID bill, the porkulus bill that Congress had passed. It passed the House, it passed the Congress, the Senate, and it landed on his desk. As we were in the middle of the broadcast yesterday, he released a new statement really sort of objecting to every part of that bill entirely. So I want to give you an update on that. Yesterday, as we were watching him just, prepare this pre-recorded speech, my mom stopped by the office, brought us some Donald Trump cookies and this nice little plant you see back here behind me. So we didn't really get to do a good analysis on what Trump had to say in that pre-recorded speech. So we want to break that down a little bit further. There's also been a ton of reaction. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, we had Rashida Tlaib, we have a lot, Senator Hawley from Missouri, we've got Lindsey Graham. A lot of people are coming out and now sort of changing their tune a little bit now that Donald Trump has spoken. So we want to break that down. What is Congress going to do with this bill? Are they going to pass it? Are they going to go and modify it to sort of comport with what Trump wants to see out of it? How is it all going to play out? We also have another big whack in the head across Congress's head from Donald Trump in the form of a veto today. We learned that the Defense Authorization Bill is vetoed by the White House. It's going to go back over to Congress, and we're going to see what they do with it. Are they going to do an override of his veto, or where is that going to go? Joe Biden was out speaking yesterday, and somebody asked him about his son, Hunter Biden. He gave kind of a weird answer as he was walking away. We want to detail what that is, and then do a quick refresher on some of the documents that we have thus far as they relate to the Hunter Biden investigation. You may not know this, but he is kind of in a little bit of hot water with the IRS under some investigations for tax fraud and some other things. So we want to break that down. And then we're going to go back and sort of wrap up the show with a little bit of the election news. We want to check in with the Supreme Court. We want to check in with Arizona. What are they doing? And then the White House has also done some interesting things as it relates to grand jury proceedings and so on. So we got a packed agenda, a lot to get through today. We're grateful that you're here. If you're not a regular of the program, right now I want to invite you to join us. Hit that subscribe button. We'd also very much appreciate a thumbs up or a share of the program. That helps YouTube suggest our video. It makes it recommended next for many people, and that helps the word get out about the channel. So we'd very much appreciate that. I'm about to go through some slides. So the format of the program is I will go through and do a bit of a presentation. Then we'll take some live chat at the end of the broadcast. So if you want to send in a super chat or if you have a pertinent question, feel free to do so. Miss Faith, who is right there in the office, right there behind me, she is clipping those and sending those, putting those in my slides so that I can address them at the end of the program. The slides are also available in our Discord server. So if you want to come and chat with us after the program or before the program or 24/7, you can do so on Discord. It's a chat server where a lot of great people hang out and get into some more in-depth, detailed conversations about some of the issues that we talk about here. So a lot going on. We want you to be a part of it. We go live at this time every day. We want to make sure that you join us, so please do so. All right, let's get into it. So as we were talking about yesterday at the end of the broadcast, Donald Trump came out and issued this new statement in a pre-recorded statement late yesterday that was really going after Congress. He was pretty aggressive, and he was going through the bill, talking about all of the problems. Spending here, spending there. We're sending all this money out of overseas. We're not helping the American people, the people who really need the help. Instead, we're focusing on sending money to Cambodia and Nepal and Venezuela and all of these other foreign countries. And it was a pretty impactful statement. But as I said, because my mom just kind of walked in and surprised us, we weren't able to get into it too much. So I want to do that now. Now, the video that we did play yesterday, and what many of you may have seen on Twitter, was not the full video. It was about 4 minutes, the one that we clipped on yesterday, but it's a much longer video. And so Miss Faith did us a huge favor and clipped some of the more pertinent parts. So I want to start with that, and then we want to go through and talk about the reaction, because last night on Twitter was lit. We saw that a lot of Republicans were now sort of changing their tune. They were walking back. If you recall, both of these bills, there are two bills that we're really talking about. One is sort of the regular federal spending bill, which is big. And then we have about a $900 billion COVID-19 stimulus/relief bill. So both of these things were kind of lumped together and then voted on it as a package deal, and it was making its way through Congress. We talked about it yesterday, but it passed both houses in overwhelming numbers. And the problem here was, as we mentioned from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she said, and she was joined by some other Republicans on Twitter, they explained that they got the bill with about 2 hours to read it before they had to vote on it. And the bill was 5,500 pages long, massive. If you did the math on that, you read it at an average reading speed, it would take you two full work weeks in order to read through literally all of the text. Congress had about 2 hours, and they voted in overwhelming numbers to support the bill, both in the House and the United States Senate, even though nobody read it, right? It's impossible to read it. And so she was very upset about it. We were upset about it. And yesterday, Twitter was just really combing through. They were trying to find all of the pork, and they were trying to sort of take the veil off of this horrendous bill. And they did a pretty good job of it. But this is Donald Trump now responding to it. This was his first official statement because the bill is now sitting on his desk. And so yesterday he released this speech, I guess it is. And let's take a listen in and see what he has to say about it.
Americans, today I want to explain to you why I am so determined to pursue every legal and constitutional option available to stop the theft of the presidential election. As president, one of my most solemn duties is to protect the integrity of your sacred right to vote. This year, using the virus as a pretext, Democrat officials in the key swing states illegally violated their own state laws in order to enable, encourage, and facilitate fraud on a scale never before seen in the history of our country. The truth is, we won the election by a landslide. We won it big. Today, I'm going to give you the facts that every American needs to know. Let's go back to the night of the election. By midnight, we had a commanding lead in the swing states. We won Florida by a record number of votes. We won Ohio by a record number of votes. And likewise, we won Iowa by 8.2%, far different than the false narrative portrayed in the media. We were up by 293,000 votes in Michigan, 120.
Okay, so you see what happened there, right? Now he's talking about the election. What the heck is that about? Yesterday in the clip that we played, it was about 4 minutes, and it was only about the stimulus bill. It was only about this behemoth, massive omnibus bill that had passed both houses. He wasn't talking about any of the election stuff. But if you go and watch the full video, this is how it starts. And he is leading the video by sort of detailing what he considers to be a stolen election. And this, my understanding now is, I checked on Twitter before we hopped on the program. I think the original video itself has now about 25 million views. So you see what he's doing, right? He's trying to sort of craft a response that is addressing the main substance of the issue here, which of course is the spending bill, but he's also tacking on something that is very, very in his interest, right? It's very self-serving for him to come out and say, listen, before I give you the good stuff, I really want you to know about this election stuff. So he's sort of adding it in like a little cherry on top. He's wanting to explain that this whole thing was stolen, which is why he needs to go and make what comes next. So that was his introduction. Let's see what this next clip contains. Here's Donald Trump yet again.
campaign received more votes than any president in history. Almost 75 million people voted for me. We earned approximately 12 million more votes than we got in 2016, the largest vote increase for an incumbent president ever recorded. I also received the largest share of non-white voters of any Republican in over 60 years. In fact, we did better with African American and Hispanic voters everywhere in the country, except for a small handful of corrupt Democrats.
Yeah, all right, so let's just carry on because we got another couple clips.
The absentee ballot rejection rates prove that hundreds of thousands of illegitimate ballots were counted in the key states. This was sufficient to change the election results all on its own. In 2016, 6.4% of mail-in ballots were rejected in Georgia. This year, fewer than a tiny percentage of 1% were rejected. So you went all the way down, a difference of more than 30 times. The same phenomenon occurred in Pennsylvania and other states. They were accepting all of these ballots, many of which were absolutely illegal. In a year in which the number of mail-in ballots was the highest ever, the rejection rate was magically the lowest ever, and it wasn't even close. The only possible explanation is that tens of thousands of ballots were unlawfully processed and counted. Most Americans would be shocked to learn that in no swing state is there any meaningful attempt to verify citizenship, residency, identity, or eligibility for mail-in ballots. The potential for illegal activity is unlimited, and that's what we just experienced. Third.
Okay, so I'm a little surprised, actually. So I didn't watch these clips before we came on the program. I would have thought that literally half of his message would not have been about the election, but it looks like it is. So it looks like Miss Faith clipped the stuff that we didn't see last night since we played the other portion of it. So we have 4 minutes from last night's show where he really was going in and attacking the bill, but it looks like the first part of the video was all about the election. We got one more clip, I think, and let's see what that looks like. So here is our final clip of Donald Trump from the full video last night.
Indeed, years before the election, the media, the big tech giants, and the Democrat Party were openly colluding to deceive the American public. Earlier this year, it was proven beyond any doubt that Joe Biden's family received millions of dollars from the Chinese Communist Party. Yet the media and tech companies worked together to completely censor this information. Our country no longer has a free press. It is a press of suppression. It is a press where the truth will never come out. It is the greatest and most shocking scandal involving a presidential candidate in modern history. But surveys show that half of those who voted for Joe Biden have never even heard of the story.
Yeah, so again, it looks like the entire introduction to the full statement was all about the election. The other, the 4 minutes that we talked about yesterday was only about the bill itself, which is interesting. So, of course, that I think is pretty effective. If 25 million people watch that, this may be the first time that a lot of those people have ever heard about any of these claims or any of these allegations. The idea that, usual demographics that support the Democrats, this last election turned out in massive numbers for Donald Trump. That might be news to people. Some of the Hunter Biden stuff, which was totally just whited out by the media, is now in people's minds. And we have to put this whole thing in context. Think about what Donald Trump is doing. This was released last night. Today, we saw that he vetoed the Defense Authorization Bill. So last night, he was sort of priming the audience to be expecting this veto. He was saying in this last clip that Section 230, the big tech companies, are major issues, or national security issues to some degree, and that is, he was sort of laying the groundwork for his veto today. What he was really getting into last night, which is what I heard, is this big laundry list of where the money is going. And in the 4 minutes that we talked about on yesterday's show, he really did a good job of breaking this down. I found another graphic over from a website called vdare.com. I think I saw a Michelle Malkin article over there, and they have this nice graphic that details what really is in the bill. So down here we can see we got stimulus checks going to illegal immigrants. According to VDARE, we have $500 million going to Belize, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras. We got $461 million going to Colombia, $75 million to the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, $33 million to Venezuela, $1.65 billion to Georgia, and just it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. We're talking about hundreds of millions, billions of dollars that are going to foreign countries around the world when the United States of America has a lot of problems here at home. And so, some of the feedback to yesterday's show was saying, hey, Rob, hold on a minute. This is the normal course of business. There's a lot of foreign aid that's necessary. It serves American interests, in particular, with certain countries like Israel, which is, responsible for creating the Iron Dome and all of those things. And I understand that the United States has a lot of interest in different countries around the world. I get it. I'm very curious how you quantify what those interests are. I'd be curious to know, what specific American interests are being served by sending $1.3 billion to Egypt, $15 million to Sri Lanka, $170 million to Vietnam. I would love to know what those are, what those specific benefits are, and whether Congress knows anything about that, right? They didn't even read the bill. It's impossible. It's literally impossible to read the bill that they voted on. And do they know any of these things, or is this just every single politician who exists in Congress just kind of putting their hand in the cookie jar to see what they can get out of it because they know they're up against a hard deadline? Remember, the government shutdown deadline, I believe, is this Monday coming up. And so if they don't get this bill passed, then we could talk about a government shutdown again. And nobody wants to do that. And in my mind, what Congress does is they specifically will delay until there's no more time to delay left. And then they have to just pull the trigger. They have to say, okay, well, we ran out of time. We couldn't do anything about it. Therefore, you only get 2 hours to read the bill. And this is the one that we're voting on. Get in line, Democrats. Get in line, Republicans. And the bill was passed by overwhelming numbers in both houses. Yesterday, after Donald Trump released that statement saying that he wants to increase the very, very small amount of money that was given or was promised to be given to Americans, it was $600. So we talk about tens of billions. I don't know if it's tens of billions, but it's up there. Billions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars are going to different companies or different countries. And in this case, the United States citizens are only getting $600. And it's not everybody. It's just sort of a small bucket of American citizens and even looks like non-citizens who are going to be getting that money. And so many people were saying, well, what the heck is that about? When Donald Trump came out and updated his statement or responded to the stimulus bill, he was saying that number should be closer to $2,000 for American citizens. And he was joined by some strange bedfellows. We're talking about Rashida Tlaib, who is vehemently anti-Trump. She posted on Twitter and said, me and AOC have the amendment ready. Send the bill back and we will put it in the $2,000 we've been fighting for that your party has been blocking. So now what they're going to do is, of course, going to blame the Republicans, which is fine. This is politics. The Republicans can handle it. But this was an amendment proposed by Rashida Tlaib, who says here in section 648, whatever of the IRS code, subsection, so on and so forth, insert $2,000, $4,000 in the case of eligible individuals filing a joint return, and strike the $600 and insert the $200, right? So this is just an amendment. It's saying this is what we're formally proposing in order to change this government bill. They're going to change the $600 to $2,000 and just strike the $600 by inserting another $2,000. So you can see what that looks like. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez also is in agreement. She posted, she said, let's do this. Rashida Tlaib and I already co-wrote the COVID amendment for the $2,000 checks, so it's ready to go. It's the same amendment that I just showed you. Glad to see the president is willing to support our legislation. We can pass $2,000 checks this week if the Senate GOP agrees to stand down. And so there's been a lot of conversation that this is what the Democrats have wanted all along. And now that Donald Trump is coming out and saying, I agree with that, I'm not going to sign the bill. Look at it again, Congress. You're seeing all the Democrats kind of fall in line, and they're going to make it very difficult for the Senate GOP to oppose this, because now they would be opposing their own party, right? They would be opposing Donald Trump. And we talked about this yesterday. What a difficult proposition that is for Senate Republicans, because if they break from the party, let's say, if they break from Donald Trump, it's almost certain that they're going to get primaried the next time they're up for election, right? The Trump Republicans that exist out there are going to be furious at them for not backing the president, and they're going to get primaried, and they may even lose their next seat as a result. And if they go the other route, then their Trump sycophants, right? They're Trump. All they do is just tote the line for Donald Trump. So they're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't. Nancy Pelosi also chimed in. She said Republicans repeatedly refused to say what amount the president wanted for direct checks, which I think that's a fact check. So I think there are some other statements saying that he had indicated he wanted higher rates at some point. She says, at last, the president has agreed to 2,000. Democrats are ready to bring this to the floor this week by unanimous consent. Let's do it. She also says, Mr. President, sign the bill to keep government open. So you see how this works. It's now sort of up against a hard deadline. They've had 6 months. They've had a full year to talk about these issues. But now, because they're up against the deadline, it's critical. These poor American families, they can't go without relief. We got to fund the military. How can you do these things? You're such a monster. But meanwhile, Congress has had a whole year to do this stuff. They've had 6 months. They could have had this bill on, done. It looks like they prepared it. They had it for 2 hours and then they were able to vote on it. So apparently they can write a bill and pass one very, very quickly when the time comes. They could have done that a long time ago. They didn't do it. So now they're going to use this. Oh, we got to keep the government open. Don't close the government. And it's going to be that they're going to use that as an impetus in order to see some action here. So Nancy Pelosi goes on. She says, urge McConnell and McCarthy to agree with the Democratic unanimous consent request for $2,000 direct payments. This can be done by noon on Christmas Eve. So they're going to be, really pushing this through. I think the Democrats are in a pretty good position here because they've got Donald Trump on their side, right? They want bigger payments. They want more relief for the American public. Donald Trump came out last night and said, I agree with that. Do it. Send it back. Do it, Republicans. We're going to see what the GOP does. Now, there are some alternative ideas here on what a solution would be to COVID relief, to COVID stimulus. Is there anything else that we can do other than just print a bunch of money and give it to Americans? Well, yeah, there is. And Ted Cruz is retweeting and chiming in on what that looks like, which I would absolutely agree with this theory. He says, I feel like this is not what Ted Cruz says. He's retweeting a Chris Pandolfo who says, I feel like I should reiterate that the best coronavirus stimulus policy would be ending the lockdowns, letting people go back to work, and passing laws that prevent the government from ever doing this again. And that's Ted Cruz, who was one of the very few no votes on the bill, on the stimulus bill. He said, nope, we're not going to vote for that thing. So he's I think sticking pretty true to his word here, saying that the government should open the country back up. That's a pretty good way to get money in people's pockets, is by allowing them to go back to work. And I would support some sort of an amendment, some sort of bill that prevents the government from ever doing this again. I was thinking about this a lot last night. When you're in law school and you're talking about constitutional law, we talk a lot about the Commerce Clause and how the Commerce Clause has sort of really been expanded so that the federal government can put its disgusting tentacles into every facet of anything that they want, because anything that you do in this world, especially in 2021, it all affects interstate commerce. So if I sell you a widget and it goes across state lines, well, I'm engaged in interstate commerce. You're engaged in interstate commerce. And because we're doing business across state lines, the federal government can step in, because we are operating within the confines of the government. The Commerce Clause has been massively expanded over the years in ways that I think are just beyond even reason. And I would like to see largely that curtailed massively. I don't think the government should be able to tell two private adults what they want to do with their lives. If they want to, open a gym, somebody else wants to go work at that gym. They both are consenting adults. They both understand the risks. And what business of it is the government to tell you that you can't go do those things? So I would agree that I think this is probably the better approach, but we're not going to see that, right? The government is not going to do that. They're going to keeping these people locked down and businesses closed all around the country. Chuck Schumer over in the Senate is also sort of joining the dog pile from the Democratic Party. He says, I'm in. What do you say, Mitch? Let's not get bogged down with ideological offsets and unrelated items and just do this. The American people deserve it. And he's tagging there the Senate Majority Leader. So, it's what Donald Trump did is sort of hand this to the Democrats on a silver platter and then kind of back the Republicans into a corner as I think is reasonable. I said this yesterday in the show. If the government is going to be closing you down and taking away your ability to earn a living, then they are depriving you of your liberty interest. As a result, they should compensate you for that denial temporarily. So we're going to hear from Rand Paul in a minute, who totally disagrees with that, but I think he's missing the mark just a little bit, or we have a slight little nuanced disagreement on what this looks like. Now, Mitch McConnell, who is over in the Senate, he has largely been silent today. He praised the package on Monday. This article comes over from Fox News. It says, Mitch McConnell silent after Trump threatens to block the coronavirus government funding package. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell hasn't responded yet to President Trump demanding Tuesday night that Congress include a $2,000 stimulus check in the coronavirus aid package that passed Monday, which included the smaller $600 checks for individuals. So remember that both of these packages passed the House and the Senate with pretty large numbers, and it's possible that there is a veto override on this thing. We just don't know yet. So let's take a listen to what Rand Paul had to say. Rand Paul's over from Kentucky, and he was on Fox News this morning, looks like Fox and Friends, and he was detailing why he thinks that most Americans, in fact, don't need a check. Here is Rand Paul on Fox and Friends.
I think there are a lot of things. I think giving money, though, to people who are already working. Look, my kids are working and don't need a check. They're not rich, but they don't need a check. And most working Americans don't need a check right now. It's a really foolish, egg-headed, left-wing socialist idea to pass out free money to people. I think there are a lot.
Yeah, but it's not really free money, right? It's your money. They took the money from you. We've been all paying taxes into the federal government for a very long time. Very long time. Basically, everything you do is taxed somewhere. And income tax goes directly to the feds. So they've been taking your money. And now if they're telling you that you can't work, then in my mind, they should be compensating you for denying you that liberty interest. Now, Rand Paul, I think, is saying that every single person doesn't, deserve a check. If they're working, maybe there's some means testing. Maybe we can have people apply to get some aid, kind of prove up their situation and say, look, I'm actually physically not working. My employer let me go because of this, or whatever seems to be the case. But he's over in Kentucky. I'm guessing that the situation in Kentucky is a lot different than what you see over in California, where, to my understanding, they're still on massive lockdowns. Right? Massive, like Category 4 lockdowns across the state. So, many of those people may not be working and may not be able to work because the government is depriving them of the ability to do so. And so, in my mind, those people do need some help because they have no recourse, right? They lost their job, or the government says you can't go to work. What are they supposed to do? And, the fact that Congress is simultaneously considering giving them $600 while sending literally billions of dollars out of the country in two simultaneous spending bills is insane to me. I don't know why they would even have that much bravado to do something so ridiculous, but they did because they're Congress and they know that largely most people are just going to ignore it, go by the wayside, and forget about it. Right? Most people are just not plugged into politics all that much. Yesterday, I was a little bit hot during the opening of the program, a little bit heated because only 6 senators voted no against this horrendous monstrosity of government overreach and overspending. And one of the disappointing votes that was a yay vote came from Josh Hawley. Now, Josh Hawley, you may not remember, he was a part of the Senate Judiciary Committee when they were doing the Amy Coney Barrett hearings. And this was sort of my first exposure to him. And I thought, this is a pretty articulate guy. He's got a pretty good grasp of some of these constitutional issues. He's speaking the language that I like about, personal responsibility and about, keeping things true to form in terms of originalism on the Supreme Court. And so I thought, okay, this is somebody of substance. This is not somebody who just throws around a bunch of political mumbo jumbo. This guy knows what he's talking about. So I was kind of curious to see what his position on this was. And unfortunately, he voted yes. And boy, I was upset about it. Now, as I was across the board, not just because of Josh Hawley, I was pretty upset about all of these Congresspeople who can't even read the bill. It's like, asking that the teacher give you an A grade when you never even did your homework. It's very, very improper in my mind. I think it's a total neglect of duty, and it's pretty disgusting behavior. I don't think that this type of stuff should be going on in Washington. I don't know why we have a 5,500-page bill. I don't know why they have 2 hours to do this stuff. I do know why. It's because it's corrupt as hell. They want to pass this stuff through. They want to shove it down your throat. They know that they're doing it right around Christmas. Most people are checked out for the holidays, and they can get away with it. But a lot of the American people, to their credit, really spoke out. So Josh Hawley was on Twitter yesterday, and he came out and was doing an about face in one of the most ridiculous tweets I've ever seen. He said, okay, here we go. This was after he voted for the bill. Donald Trump came out and gave his statement and said that bill's garbage. Redo it. Josh Hawley came back out and said, okay, on Twitter, he said, Donald Trump is right. Workers deserve much more than $600, as I have repeatedly said and fought for. And there's obviously plenty of money to do it. Look at what Congress threw away on corporate giveaways and foreign buyouts. Let's get it done. Okay, so why did you vote yes for it? Well, Twitter blew him up. It was a lot of fun last night on Twitter watching all of the shade that was being thrown at these Congresspeople for flip-flopping, for being weak little quislings. If he really felt that way, he had an opportunity to vote no on this thing. He didn't do it. He voted yes. Now Donald Trump came back out and he has to reverse course. It's pretty pathetic in my mind. Here is just a sampling. Let's just rub that in just a little bit. Let's see what some people had to say to Josh Hawley and see if anybody is over the mark. We have Mike Cernovich, who says, "Nice try, Faker Josh. You wore your dog collar last night for your donor daddy. No takebacks." Tim Poor says, "This bill is an insult. More swamp politicians. I cannot believe you signed on to this bill. Rally the Senate GOP leaders to reject this bill, Mr. Hawley." Dr. Don Michael says, "You sold out the American people by signing that bill. We know who the rhinos are now." Another one says, "Josh, I liked you, but by signing the bill, you showed you are a coward at best. You're welcome to try to make it up to us by pledging to fight for us on the 6th. We'll let you know then whether you have a chance of redeeming yourself going forward." Susan C. says, "We want all the port and foreign spending stripped. Why give to others when your people are starving?" Yeah, it's a good question. Why are they doing that? We have Carrie Kellerman, who says, "Never sign anything you haven't read first," which is generally a good rule. We also have Brandon Serio, who says, "But you voted yes. If you want to lead, then lead, but don't vote yes, then whine about it on Twitter later, like so many other GOP politicians." And that's a lot of the frustration that I was feeling, right? These people are talking out of both sides of their mouths. If you thought it was a good bill, then vote yes for it. If you think it's a garbage bill, then vote no for it. And, they're going to walk the line like the politicians do. Well, wait a minute. I had to vote for that because it was $600 and American families need $600 and so on and so on and so on and so forth. Well, listen, guys, if you want to put up a fight, then put up a fight. If you want to fake putting up a fight, you're going to get called out on it, as you have been now, Mr. Josh Hawley. We have the same sort of feedback from Lindsey Graham, also getting dumped on all over Twitter, as well he should be, well deserving of it. This is Lindsey Graham, who says, "Appreciate the fact that Speaker Pelosi supports President Trump's idea to increase direct payments to $2,000 per person. The American people are hurting and deserve relief. I know there is much bipartisan support for this idea. Let's go further." Well, that's weird. Didn't he also vote for the bill? Okay, well, let's see what Twitter has to say about it. Mindy Robinson says, "Take the goddamn pork out of the bill with all its BS money for liberal projects in foreign countries now. Do you think we don't realize that politicians are laundering money through them? Why else would they care? Man the hell up, you dandy." That's from Mindy Robinson, who's pretty aggressive. A nice little blue check mark. Very aggressive. Might be a good follow. We have Bruno Amato, who says, "Lindsey, no mention that his hero Trump just pardoned murderers." Okay, so that's not on point, but it's relevant, right? Because he did just issue a number of pardons. We have Why Is It Always Bob, who says, "The Democrats have been fighting for more than COVID relief for the American people since March. Trump said and did nothing." And I would tend to agree with that, right? Where was Donald Trump on this pre-election, right? It's a good idea now, but where was this before the election? And other people are pushing back and they're saying this is not Donald Trump's idea. So he said, Lindsey Graham said here that the idea was Donald Trump's. He's getting a lot of pushback on that. Other people are saying, let's make it $2,000 a month until 75% of the public is vaccinated, and so on, right? And Leia down here says, "Then why did you and the Senate Republicans reject another $1,200 direct relief check? Why did you reject several different relief bills that the House passed? You rejected $1,200 earlier this week. Why are you supportive of a $2,000 check now? Because the Georgia runoffs." So you see people are getting it from both sides. Lindsey Graham is getting it from a lot of the Democrats who are anti-Trump, and we're seeing that Josh Hawley is getting it from a lot of conservatives. People on both sides of the aisle are angry. They are very, very upset, I think, as they should be, because everybody's playing politics with this thing. And anytime that I think, the congressional burgeoning budgets that they try to pass and cram down our throats, especially in the manner in which they did this. Listen, if they would have had, set up, we've got a $2.4 trillion bill. Here's what's in it. We've got a 6-month. We got 2 weeks of open comment by the public. What do you think about this, American people? Remember, we are a republic. We have representatives for a reason. They're supposed to represent our interests. which means we have to know a little bit about what they're doing. We don't have to know every single thing, but a little bit about it, right? This is a big deal. This is one of Congress's primary responsibilities, is to pass a budget, pass the spending bills. They're the only one capable of doing it. So every single one of these Congresspeople who just voted on it without reading about it, or even having a conversation with their constituency, I think is unforgivable. And they voted yes. Now they're trying to backtrack it. I'm very grateful that the American people are not going to let them get away with it. I don't care what side of the aisle that they're on, because it's ridiculous. And every single congressperson who voted yes without reading the bill, without knowing what's in it, should be ashamed of themselves. That's one man's opinion. Donald Trump also, I think, agrees with that. He vetoed the defense bill. He promised that he would do it on December 17th, and then he did it. This was his tweet from back then in mid-December. He says, "I will veto the defense bill, which will make China very unhappy. They love it. Must have Section 230 termination, protect our national monuments, and allow for the removal of the military from far away and very unappreciative lands. Thank you." All right, and that's what he posted back on December 17th. Well, today, boom, that veto came to fruition. He kept his word, and he did, in fact, veto the Defense Authorization Bill. We have a very popular account known as Cat Turd who's reporting in here that Donald Trump vetoed a colossal $740 billion defense bill that was breaking with the Republican-led Senate. And so this article says, in a move that was generally expected on Wednesday, Donald Trump vetoed $740.5 billion annual defense policy bill, not the COVID stimulus bill, which he also threatened to block late last night, following through on his threat despite legislation passing Congress with a veto-proof majority. The president has previously opposed a provision in the measure to rename military bases that honor Confederate generals. He has also demanded that the bill include a provision to abolish Section 230 tech liability shield. And I wanted to show you the actual statement, the actual letter that goes back to Congress that is detailing why the president will not be signing the bill. So let's read through it and understand what is in it, because you're going to see a lot of stuff, largely sort of the criticism that I have seen here has been that Donald Trump is a racist because he is wanting to keep certain bases, federal monuments named for Confederate individuals. So, of course, the racism charge comes out at every single one of these things. And anytime you challenge any sort of defense spending in the United States, you're also jeopardizing national security. You're also somebody who is not thinking about our troops. You know, you're not supporting the men and women in the uniform, the men and women who sacrifice for this country. You know, suddenly, somehow, you hate all of them just because you want to think about how you are appropriating funds to supply the military. So those are the two criticisms. Let's see what the actual letter has to say. Number one, he says, I am returning without my approval, H.R. 6395, the National Defense Authorization Act for 2021. My administration recognizes the importance of the act to our national security. Unfortunately, the act fails to include critical national security measures, includes provisions that fail to respect our veterans and our military's history, and contradicts efforts by my administration to put America first in our national security and foreign policy actions. He says it is a, quote, gift to China and Russia. This next paragraph is talking about how great his administration is. Over $2 trillion has been donated, or appropriated to the military during his 4 years, along with many others, entirely rebuilt the military, which was depleted when he took office. And he says here, this is kind of the key bit. He says, your failure to terminate the very dangerous national security risk of Section 230 will make our intelligence virtually impossible to conduct without everyone knowing what we are doing at every step. Okay, and I'm not sure how much I understand what he's getting at with that. Your failure to terminate the very dangerous national security risk of Section 230 will make our intelligence virtually impossible to conduct without everyone knowing what we are doing at every step. Is he saying that Russia and China are going to be able to see what we're doing because they're going to post on Facebook or on Twitter? I don't really understand that. He says the act fails to even make any meaningful changes to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, despite bipartisan calls for repealing the provision. Section 230 facilitates the spread of foreign disinformation online. Okay, there it is, which is a serious threat to our national security and our election integrity. It must be repealed, is what he says. And so Section 30 has been something we've talked a little bit about on this program. We actually went through the statute itself and tried to understand what it is. If you're not familiar, the quick and dirty of it is that back in the 1990s, I think this bill was passed in 1999. What did he say in here? No, I don't know when that act was passed. Very early, very young, during the infancy of the internet. And what Congress was concerned about is that all of these tech companies would be sued, right? Anything that was posted on their platforms, remember MySpace, if you went on MySpace and you posted something that was defamatory about another person, well, the question was, could the person who was defamed, could they sue MySpace? Could they sue one of those original early internet companies? So Section 230 was put in place to act as a liability shield to say, no, if you are just a platform, and you're not a publisher, then you're protected from liability. People can post all sorts of stuff on your platform, and we want to make sure that you don't get sued into oblivion, because that is not what we want the internet to be. We want to foster, free communication, free thought, open ideas, free expression, and so on. And if everybody's suing each other because somebody posted something on a platform, that's not good for the development of the internet. Largely, these were new startup companies, right? They were very small, didn't have any resources to protect themselves, and so on. So that's what Section 230 was. Now, the entire world has changed. Right now, we see sort of this monopolistic tendency from all of these different tech companies to gobble up all their competitors and then just be this big Goliath that nobody can do anything about. And it's causing problems, right? There's a good argument here that Twitter, Google, Facebook, they helped swing the course of the election this last go round. I don't know whether there's a real national security threat by them permeating foreign intelligence. I don't know if that is really a serious threat to national security. I don't know. But if you have a select group of people who control the narrative for the entire country, I would consider that to be a national security threat. Right? Many people who are Democrats or liberals may support that. They may support this idea of limiting dangerous information. I've heard a lot about that anybody challenging the election is dangerous, really dangerous, or spreading disinformation. And we got to control that because apparently the American people are too stupid to think for themselves about whether information is valid or not. So we need these tech companies to act as gatekeepers and protect us, because we're all just so innocent. We can't think for ourselves. We need Twitter, Google, and Facebook to protect us and tell us how to think, which I think is a big concern. And if they're able to just adjust the algorithm a little bit and swing a couple million votes, that's a big deal. And it may be something worth looking into. And, we saw it this election. We still see it. Right? Every single tweet, YouTube issued a new policy that anybody challenging a lot of this stuff or talking about these issues is going to have videos deleted. We saw one of Ron Paul's videos get deleted, although that wasn't over the election. That was over COVID stuff. Scott Adams was talking about the election. He had a video deleted. And so, this idea of what Section 230 was in place to achieve, which was open communication and free expression, has sort of gone by the wayside. The idea that we want to protect small internet startups is also by the wayside. Google doesn't need any protection. People need protection from Google. Same with Facebook and Twitter, right? They're big monopolies. They're a behemoth. They control all of the conversation. And so if we give them a lot of power and authority to kind of manipulate the public conversation, I can see easily how that could be a national security threat. And so he's making that argument and lumping it into this bill. Back in his letter, he says, additionally, this includes language that would require the renaming of certain military installations. Over the course of the United States history, these locations have taken on significance to the American people, far transcends their namesakes. So this is where he's talking about, my administration respects the legacy of the millions of American servicemen and women who have served with honor at these military bases. From these facilities, we've won 2 world wars. I've been clear in opposition to politically motivated attempts like this to wash away history and to dishonor the immense progress our country has fought for in our founding principles. And, this is not something I can really get too bent out of shape about. I really can see the argument both ways. If the naming of a military base is offensive to some people, that's not the hill that I'm going to die on. I don't care if it's renamed or not. Now, I never served in the armed services, so I don't know how that works. If you have served, I don't know if there's some sort of, honor or tradition that you take and carry with you. I just know what it's like to be a civilian. And I know in Arizona, we have a Luke Air Force Base. If Luke Air Force Base was renamed to Mark Air Force Base or to John Air Force Base or to whatever Air Force Base, I'm going to sleep just fine at night. I don't particularly care one way or the other. If Luke is offensive to some people and they want to change it to Mark, that's fine with me. Like I said, I don't have a dog in this fight, but maybe some people do. And I could see an argument for that, right? Think about, your college, or think about your school or your, football team. You have some things that are symbolic in life that are bigger than the name, that have a deeper connection to people. And I can see how that could be problematic. But I think this is sort of a throw in on this letter. It goes on. It says the act also restricts the president. So this act that they're trying to pass also restricts, this is interesting, the president's ability to preserve our nation's security interest by arbitrarily limiting the amount of military construction funds that can be used to respond to a national emergency. In a time when adversaries have the means to directly attack the homeland, the president must be able to safeguard the American people without having to wait for congressional authorization. So Congress is trying to implement some additional restrictions on the presidency. The act also contains an amendment that would slow down the rollout of nationwide 5G, especially in rural areas. Numerous provisions of the act directly contradict my administration's foreign policy, particularly my efforts to bring our troops home. I oppose endless wars, as does the American public. Over bipartisan objections, however, this act purports to restrict the president's ability to withdraw troops from Afghanistan, Germany, and South Korea. Not only is this bad policy, but it is unconstitutional. Article 2 of the Constitution makes the president the commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and vests in him the executive power. Therefore, the decision regarding how many troops to deploy and where, including Afghanistan and Germany and South Korea, rests with him. The Congress may not abrogate his authority to itself directly or indirectly as purported spending restrictions. For all of these reasons, I cannot support this bill. My administration has taken strong actions to help keep our nation safe and support our service members. I will not approve this bill, which would put the interest of Washington, D.C. establishment over those of the American people. It's my duty to return this bill without my approval. Signed, Donald J. Trump. Now it was issued today at the White House, December 23rd, 2020. Those arguments, I think, are pretty hard to disagree with. We all know from grade school that the president is the commander-in-chief, and you would presume that he would have the authority to bring troops home. Congress is telling him, you can't do that. In my mind, that's a conflict, right? This is a separation of powers issue. The way Congress gets around that, of course, is by including this stuff in spending provisions, because Congress does have the ability to tax and spend. That's their power. The president's power is the commander-in-chief. He's the executor of the laws. He's the one who goes and executes the laws. The Congress passes the laws, and they also appropriate spending. They appropriate the money. They have the power of the purse, as we call it. So even though they're not saying, they're not passing a bill saying that Donald Trump cannot bring the troops home, they're just saying, if Donald Trump wants to bring the troops home, we're not paying for it. That money has to come from somewhere. So they're limiting his ability to do certain things using the power of the purse, which I think is inappropriate. And I would say that about, any president, right? And Donald Trump, I think, is doing, in fact, the right thing here that a lot of Democrats would agree with, right? Bringing the troops home, something that Obama promised to do but didn't quite get done. And Donald Trump is saying, I want to do that. And we're going to see what the Democrats have to say about it. Of course, they've already got their talking points out. I've already detailed what they are. You could probably predict them very easily. This is a statement from U.S. Senator Mark Warner, who is a Democrat from Virginia, and he's the vice chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. He released this statement. Of course, it's the same stuff you would hear. It's unconscionable that the president would choose to throw a wrench into the passage of this bill as critical as our nation's annual defense bill. It says here, quote, the president's decision to veto this bipartisan legislation on his way out the door poses a serious threat to national security, jeopardizes mission readiness, the well-being of our service members and their families, and all of the military construction projects, and so on 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 and so on. Right? I look forward to overriding the president's fruitless and ridiculous attempt to undermine our national security over his shifting rationale for his decision to veto, including a provision to rename bases honoring Confederate military leaders, a provision that many in the president's own party have supported. So we're not seeing much here on whether or not we see again here, talking about national halls. We got, it's all Confederacy stuff, efforts to advance racial justice and so on. So, they're kind of glossing over the constitutional argument about whether the president can bring troops home. I think, as I said, that's not something that they want to highlight. They want to highlight the racism stuff. They also want to highlight the fact that Donald Trump is apparently hates the service members now because he wants to bring them home. Apparently bringing troops home is not good for the troops. I don't know. As I said, I did not serve, so, it's hard to comment on some of that stuff. Pelosi's statement also chimes in. She's also, outraged, of course. Speaker Pelosi issued this statement to the president's veto this afternoon. She says the president's veto of the National Defense Authorization Act is an act of staggering recklessness that harms our troops, endangers our security, and undermines the will of the bipartisan Congress. For 60 years, the NDAA has been passed on a bipartisan and bicameral basis. In a time when our country was just targeted with a massive cyber attack, it is particularly hard to understand the reasoning behind the president's irresponsibility. Disturbingly, Trump is using his final hours in office to sow chaos, including by denying our service members, there it is, a long overdue pay raise and hazard duty pay and so on. The president's veto also deprives our country and allies of tools to protect global security and cyber. So they're all just kind of doing a slam dunk on it. She also will go back down to this Confederacy stuff. She says Trump's veto violates our national values as it would block action to rename military bases and infrastructure named after those who served in the Confederacy, which is supported by an overwhelming majority of the American people. So, they're gonna latch on to the things that, of course, politically suit them the most, and it's always racism with Trump. And we've seen a lot of this hinting that Donald Trump has issues with the service members and the people in the military, but I have not seen that myself. What's going to happen here? Well, it's probably going to be overridden. I would guess that this bill goes back and that the Senate and the House of Representatives override the veto. So remember what happens here is if you have enough support in Congress, if it's 2/3 support it, the president vetoes it, 2/3 can vote to overrule the veto and make it law anyways. It looks like that's probably what's going to happen. We can see here, this comes from Manu Raju over at CNN. He says at 1:43 a.m., Mitch McConnell over in the Senate set up the process for the vote to override Trump's expected veto of the Defense Authorization Bill. The Senate will return on December 29th to begin processing the veto override. So that's just 4 days after Christmas. This would only occur if the House succeeds in overriding the veto on December 28th. If the Senate has to jump through the procedural hoops to get a final vote on the veto override, it's possible that the final vote could be on the morning of January 3rd, the last day of the 116th Congress. So the new Congress will come in then, and then we're going to have the counting of the electoral votes on the 6th. So I'm looking at a calendar right now. So December 29th is going to be next week on Tuesday. December 28th is going to be the Monday, which means that is the same day as the government shutdown. Interesting, right? So what happens if the bill that is currently sitting on the president's desk, what if he vetoes that one too? So they're going to have to come back on December 28th, even though the government is shut down. Is Congress going to come back on that day? I don't know. Things are going to get interesting in these next few weeks if you weren't already aware of that. So we are going to be continuing to cover this stuff. Donald Trump is causing a lot of noise. Anytime that, Congress gets a backhand, I'm usually okay with that, especially as it relates to spending. So we'll follow along. We want to see you here, so make sure that you are subscribed. All right, let's transition a little bit. We have heard from Donald Trump. Let's hear a little bit from Joe Biden. Joe Biden had an interesting day yesterday, gave a speech over from the fictitious office of the president-elect. I don't think a thing like that exists yet anywhere formally, but he is standing in front of this podium talking about stuff. And let's take a look at what he was doing when he was responding to a very interesting question about Hunter Biden. Recall that prior to the election, we've been talking a lot about Hunter Biden. We were sort of covering that story because nobody in the mainstream media would even talk about it. It was just a total whitewash across the board. Everybody was trying to sweep this stuff under the rug, which my point back then was, hey guys, he's going to get asked about it at some point, right? We probably should talk about this now, because if Joe Biden is elected, do you think the Republicans are going to let this up? Reporters are going to start asking him about this stuff, and it's going to be very damaging to his presidency. And it's really going to make you look like, I would say, less credible or less than genuine as a news agency if you were not informing the American people about this stuff. You kind of have a duty to bring the news, even though it may be hurtful to your candidate. Don't you as a journalist have a duty to report the facts, report the news? Many of them, in my mind, this last go around totally abdicated that responsibility. They did everything in their power to try to make Joe Biden look good. They weren't asking questions. They weren't following him around. They were just saying, well, he called the lid today. What time is it? Oh, it's about 10 o'clock in the morning. That's okay. He called the lid. Well, we don't need any questions for him. He's hunkered down in his basement. He's protecting, himself against the coronavirus. And this is what a real leader should do. And in my mind, I'm thinking, wait a minute, this guy is going to be put on through the ringer if he does get elected, right? He's going to have to be, doing all the things that a president does. It requires a lot of energy, got to answer a lot of questions, a lot of very hard questions that just simply weren't asked prior to November 3rd. But here we are now. Now we finally have some reporters who are coming out and asking him questions, and he's fielding some of them. So Biden was speaking yesterday. Fox News reporter asks him about the Hunter Biden investigation. Here is what Joe had to say. Here is Joe Biden yesterday.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you.
All right, so real quick on that. He says, it's probably hard to hear. He says, Mr. President-elect, do you still consider the story from previously about your son, Hunter Biden? And then that's when Joe goes, nope, I'm out, right? He sort of turns around right away, goes, nope. He was going to entertain the question, and then he just bails. So let's go back and watch that clip. Whoops, sorry. One more.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. God love you, man. You're a one-horse pony. I tell you. Thank you. Thank you. I promise you my Justice Department will be totally on its own making its judgments about how they should proceed. Thank you.
All right, so a lot to sort of break down there. I think the guy who was asking him the question is Peter Doocy over at Fox News, and he's asking him, do you think that that original story about Hunter Biden was in fact Russian disinformation? Joe Biden says, yes, yes, yes. You're a one-horse pony, man. And so I think he got two things confused. He got the one-horse town and the one-trick pony, which are two separate things. He kind of crammed them into one-horse pony, right? And so kind of an interesting thing, caught a lot of people's eyebrows. We all went, that's kind of weird. But, that's kind of what Joe Biden does. He's kind of used to making those weird comments. He's got a lot of them. I was thinking about that one where he was talking about somebody running their hand up and down his leg, something like that. A lot of weird stuff comes out of his mouth. That's okay. But what he's saying here, the more pertinent part is that he's saying, yes, 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 it's Russian disinformation, which I think is very interesting now because there's a lot of documents that we have seen that clearly are Hunter Biden in a lot of malfeasance, a lot of emails and all sorts of stuff. I mean, is that disinformation or is that just information? I think it's just information at this point, but he's entitled to his interpretation of that. The other thing that was very interesting was when he said, my Justice Department will make an independent decision on what to do, which is a little bit questionable. Okay. When you're investigating the president, who is the executive over the Department of Justice, that's when you will typically call in a special counsel. You'll bring in somebody else who is not associated with the Department of Justice, or in other words, doesn't report to the president, because you can have a pretty big conflict of interest there. Right. Bill Barr, many people have been saying that Bill Barr was sort of, Trump's right-wing man doing everything that Trump wanted him to do. And that wasn't the case at all. I mean, I've given Bill Barr a lot of credit for that, for building in some distance between him and Trump. Trump has been sort of screaming at everybody, just saying Bill Barr needs to go and indict this person and investigate this and appoint this, and Bill Barr just says, no, I don't have a basis for that. Okay, that's how a Justice Department is supposed to run. Very different than Barack Obama's Justice Department, where Eric Holder said that he was the president's wingman. Right? He's going to do whatever the president wanted. That's not what justice looks like. It shouldn't be political. And Bill Barr, I think, did a pretty good job of keeping some distance from the presidency and maintaining the integrity of the Justice Department, much to Trump's chagrin, but for good reason. Now, what Joe Biden just said is sort of in the mold of what Barack Obama had, which was a wingman in Eric Holder. He's saying, my Justice Department is going to make an independent decision on what to do with this stuff. Well, why would you allow, if you're the president, why would you allow your Justice Department to investigate your son or indict him on federal tax fraud charges? Well, you wouldn't, right? So that causes a lot of people to sort of raise their eyebrows yet again. Okay, so you're not going to appoint special counsel. Your Justice Department is going to make an independent decision on what to do. Were you talking about special counsel? What does that look like? So then he just turned and walked away, doesn't answer any more questions. And of course, no other reporters are going to ask any follow-up questions. You got to have Peter Doocy over from Fox News. Everyone else is just going to kind of let this thing slide by the wayside. But let's take a quick refresher on what is going on with Hunter Biden now that Mr. Biden has addressed it. This came back out on December 9th. Many people missed it. I don't think we even covered it on this channel, so let's do so now. NBC Politics reported breaking: Hunter Biden, President-elect Biden's son, says in his statement that he was not aware, or he has been informed that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware is, quote, investigating my tax affairs. He released a statement, and the statement from the Biden-Harris transition also is here. Hunter says, I learned yesterday for the first time that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware advised my legal counsel also yesterday that they are investigating my tax affairs. I take this matter very seriously, but I am confident that a professional and objective review of these matters will demonstrate that I handled my affairs legally and appropriately, including with the benefit of professional tax advisors. Statement from Biden-Harris transition says, President-elect Biden is deeply proud of his son, who has fought through difficult challenges, including the vicious personal attacks of recent months, only to emerge stronger. And we did cover a lot of the Hunter Biden stuff, and I try to do so delicately, right? I work with a lot of people who have, addiction problems. I had some issues with alcohol myself, and consider it to be a very serious thing that we should all talk about, and try not to scold people for their addictions. I also am not the son of the president, right? He is the son of the president, and some of his issues that we were able to cover on this channel look like they were very, very, very concerning, especially if you're in that position. So, these sort of vicious personal attacks, I think, if you're going to be in this sort of spotlight, if you're going to be traveling around the world and doing business on behalf of your father or on behalf of the Biden family, you deserve the scrutiny. You deserve that attention. You can't escape it, right? Donald Trump's family has been put through the ringer as well. So, I understand as a father, you have to say, I'm proud of my son and all these things, but you're also the president, and there's also a lot of concerns here. This is worth questioning. This is worth asking. Hunter Biden's tax affairs are under federal investigation, according to this article, once again over from Fox News. Links to China funds emerge, sources say. So we're going to go through some of the documents as they pertain to Hunter Biden. The source said President-elect Biden is not the subject of any grand jury investigation at this time. Also tells Fox News that this investigation was predicated in part by a suspicious activity report regarding suspicious foreign transactions. Another source familiar with the investigation tells Fox News that the SARS, these suspicious activity reports, were regarding funds from China and other foreign nations. A Treasury Department official who did not comment on the investigation spoke broadly, saying that if there is something out of the ordinary about a particular transactions, then SARs are filed by financial institutions. The official told Fox News that a mere filing does not mean that there has been a criminal act, just that they're sort of looking into it. One of the documents that was obtained by Fox News was designated as an FBI receipt for the property form, which details the Bureau's interactions with John Paul Mac Isaac, the owner of the Mac shop, who reported the laptop's contents to the authorities. So you can see here, we did talk about this document before the election. This is from the United States Department of Justice, and it looks like a receipt, right? And then they have the case number, and they've got signatures and so on. So they went and took that laptop from John Paul Mac Isaac. And to catch you up on this story, if you're not familiar, prior to the election, Hunter Biden dropped off a laptop with a Mac repair store, and the Mac repair person tried to return the laptop at some point. Hunter Biden was not responsive. The property was considered to be abandoned. He went through the hard drive, saw all sorts of very concerning, images and emails and all sorts of stuff. That got turned over to Rudy Giuliani prior to the election, and then he used it as the October surprise. So the basis, sort of the pretext for the release of this information was, that they just came upon it. I have no doubt in my mind that they knew that this existed and this was their home run. This was their October surprise, but it didn't work out so well for them. But we do know that there's something here, because the government is now involved, and this image shows that it came from the Department of Justice itself. Another document over from the U.S. District Court You can see here, this was an order. It says you are commanded in here to come in and deliver this property over in lieu of a personal appearance. They want this property. According to multiple officials and the FBI's website, 272 is the Bureau's classification for money laundering, while 272D refers to money laundering unknown SUA, which is the specified unlawful activity white-collar crime program, according to FBI documents. One government official described 272D as transnational or blanket. Here's another document as it relates to Hunter Biden. This is the proof of service. So this was the Mac shop who signed these formal government documents and handed over the material to the FBI. And then lastly, we have attachment A, which is sort of detailing the exhibits. We got the Apple MacBook laptop computer. We've got a Western Digital, looks like a hard drive with various serial numbers. So according to another document, which was also obtained by Fox News, this was a subpoena sent to the Mac store asking him to testify. One page of the subpoena showed what appeared to be serial numbers for a laptop and a hard drive taken into possession. So, that is all still going on right now as of December 9th. After the election, Hunter Biden released a statement. Joe Biden is now saying that his Justice Department is going to look into it and make a decision on what to do. There's a conflict of interest there. That's where a special counsel gets appointed. We're going to see if that happens. AG Barr, Attorney General Bill Barr, today was his last day, I believe. So there's a new acting attorney general who is going to step into his shoes. We'll see if there's any action taken by the DOJ prior to the new year. Joe Biden also, very interestingly, said that we're in for some serious dark days there, America. Get prepared for it. This is Joe Biden yesterday talking about the coronavirus and what the future looks like under a Biden administration. Doesn't look so good. Here he is.
But even with the changes in approach I'm going to put in place in late January, people are still going to be getting sick and dying from COVID. One thing I promise you about my leadership during this crisis, I'm going to tell it to you straight. I'm going to tell you the truth. And here's the simple truth. Our darkest days in the battle against COVID are ahead of us, not behind us. So we need to prepare ourselves to steel our spines. As frustrating it is to hear, it's going to take patience, persistence, and determination to beat this virus. There'll be no time to waste in taking the steps we need to turn this crisis around. My administration will start to do its part on our first day in office with masking requirements, a new strategy for testing, accelerated protection, protective gear. And we're going to challenge Congress and the American people to step up immediately as well to do their part.
Yeah, we've already done our part, my friend. We locked down for the 15 days. We've done everything humanly possible. Everybody was compliant for a very long time. The federal government and the state governments were telling us that this lockdown stuff was only so that they could build additional capacity at our medical facilities, at our hospitals. They said we need 15 days so we can gear up. We got to get more ventilators. We got to get more intubation people. We got to rally up some volunteers. We need time to build capacity throughout the nation. Well, we've been going on for about 9 months now. Joe Biden says we're going to go back to the darkest days ahead of us. So what does that mean? More lockdowns, mandatory vaccination, mandatory masks so far is what he says. Americans need to steel your spines because we got a dark future coming up. Got a lot of work ahead of us. And, this type of language, it's very curious that it's coming out now. Where was this type of language before the election? Was he telling Americans that this was coming? I didn't see that. I saw a lot of this, on day one, we're going to change this. We're going to listen to the science. We're going to do all sorts of amazing things. We're going to crush the virus. A lot of that type of language. Not this is just the beginning, America. Didn't hear any of that. So, now we have a pretty big switch from the Biden people, and this is apparently, allegedly, what people voted for. We want more lockdowns. We want more government intrusions. We want more mandatory things that we have to do in order to comply. We want less work. We want more stimulus. That's Joe Biden. All right, we have some more coronavirus news. We have Dr. Birx saying that she plans to retire, and she's largely doing so because of some of the public response to her traveling home to visit her family. And she's saying, unfortunately, my family is just feeling alone and isolated. It's a very sad situation. Here is Dr. Birx. This was, I think, yesterday. She's saying, I'm retiring after this is over.
No, I want the Biden administration to be successful. I've worked since 1980 in the federal government, first through the military, then through HHS, and then detailed to the State Department and detailed here, where I hope I was helpful. I will be helpful in any role that people think I can be helpful in, and then I will retire. I will have to say, as a civil servant, I will be helpful through a period of time. And then I will have to say that this experience has been a bit overwhelming. It's been very difficult on my family. I think what was done in the last week to my family, they didn't choose this for me. They've tried to be supportive, but to drag my family into this, when my daughter hasn't left that house in 10 months, my parents have been isolated for 10 months.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, we've all been doing the same thing, doctor. We all know. I understand your frustration. I understand you're trying to help, but we get it. We're all tired of it too. And I just get so sick. I'm not an anti-masker, but she's on TV in an empty room. Why is she wearing a mask, right? It's symbolic. It's propaganda in my mind, just to put a mask on in a situation that's not needed, just to convey a message. I understand why she's doing it. I think it's the dumbest thing in the world. I think it's very obvious and transparent. Maybe they think they're helping, but it's very tedious. And when she comes out and says, listen, everybody's been on lockdown, we know. Yeah, we know. You were part of the team that helped create these policies that have trickled down to all of America. There's been no common sense about this approach. Her parents maybe should be staying home. The daughter, who's probably healthy and young, maybe not so much. And so our Congresspeople, the people in charge of the government, have just been mixing this up, just screwing it up every single which way. And now Joe Biden says we're not even done. We're just getting started, folks. America has dark days ahead. So, the optimism from Donald Trump saying we're going to crush this virus, we're going to beat the China virus, we're going to get back to work, we're going to reinvigorate the economy, we're going to build back, the entire structure faster and better than before. That's all gone. It's out the window. Forget about that idea. It's all now about how the darkest days are coming forward. And that's very problematic, I think, for the country, that we have that type of leader who's going to be just telling us how horrible things are going to be. Very disappointing, but that's what we're stuck with for the time being. All right, let's go over to some litigation news. We've got some election stuff that we have to talk about. What's going on at the Supreme Court? Any activity? We talked about this earlier, I think this week or last week. We were talking specifically about Donald Trump filing as the petitioner in a lawsuit in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, one of the same cases that we've been following for some time, or a very closely related case, which is basically everything going on against Kathy Boockvar, who is the Secretary of Pennsylvania. And what this case did is it consolidated a number of other lower level court claims that were already sitting or had already been decided by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, renewing a lot of those issues and then bringing it to the Supreme Court in a petition for a writ of certiorari. Well, what happened? Has anything happened? Not much. So this is from the Supreme Court docket. We see here Donald Trump versus Kathy Boockvar. December 23rd is when it was docketed. So that is today, it looks like. Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. And there is a decision date from the lower court ruling, which was on October 23rd. So now it's docketed today. And we see two of these motions were filed. And it looks like the response is due on January 22nd. So two things here. We have the petition for a writ of certiorari, and then we have the motion to expedite the consideration of the petition for a writ of certiorari. So two things, right? Number one, remember the Supreme Court doesn't have to hear a case. You have to ask them to hear your case. That's what the petition is. And so they filed that, and the Supreme Court has said, okay, we're going to at least consider it. The response deadline is due by January 22nd, okay, which is after inauguration. So there's a second motion that was also filed asking the Supreme Court to expedite the consideration of that. And that has not been ruled on yet, or maybe it has. We don't know, but they just said, actually, no, we would know if they had ruled on that. So it doesn't look like that's been ruled on. So currently the response deadline is by January 22nd. If they grant the motion to expedite consideration of the petition, then presumably that January 22nd deadline would be moved up, which is what Donald Trump would need in order to see some change, right? We would need something that gets settled before January 6th so that the Supreme Court can weigh in, potentially cause some Congresspeople or some senators to change their votes or to at least object to some of the votes as they're being counted in the U.S. House of Representatives. If that happens, then there's I think more legitimacy behind some of the challenges, and you may see that change in the Congress when they're counting the votes. We will see. Some other election news is over from Sean Davis. The White House announced today that Trump signed an order on December 18th giving John Durham the authority to present classified information to a grand jury investigating the Russian collusion hoax. So this is pretty interesting, not necessarily election news, but it is interesting that this memo was drafted. You can see here it was written on December 18th, and this was issued on, it looks like, December 22nd. So very recent news. This is going out to the Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, Defense, Attorney General, Secretary of Energy, and so on. The Attorney General's authority to use classified information in connection with the review of intelligence activities related to the 2016 presidential campaigns. So they're giving John Durham the ability to go in and actually present some of this stuff to a grand jury. And I'm talking about the classified stuff. In addition, the Attorney General is authorized to use classified information as he deems necessary in connection with his review, including in a grand jury or other proceedings. So very interesting, right? Now they're going to be able to take this stuff in front of a grand jury and present some of the classified information. This order, or this Rule 9-9230 says that ordinarily grand jurors do not have the security clearances required for access to classified information, which makes sense. So the disclosure of such information may only be done with the approval of the agency that's responsible for classifying the information sought to be disclosed. So the way that this works, a grand jury proceeding is sort of a closed door proceeding. It's a secret body where the government will go and present certain evidence to them about whether they want to move forward with pursuing criminal charges. And the grand jury will look at the evidence and they'll say, okay, based on what we've seen, we think that there's enough probable cause to continue forward with an indictment. And so here what they're talking about specifically is that now they're going to be able to show that grand jury some information that would have otherwise been classified. Now, what does that lead to? I don't know. We're talking about the 2016 election. What does that have to do with 2020? I don't know. Interesting, though. Interesting little maneuvers going on in the federal government. We also have some news over in Arizona. I think we're going to wrap up with this story before we get into the super chats and the messages and the chats. So we see here that today, this was yesterday, breaking, state Senate Republicans speed up court proceedings regarding election subpoenas. They intend to send Congress an update before the Electoral College. Interesting. Okay, so State Senate President Karen Fann and the Judiciary Committee Chair Eddie Farnsworth, they filed their own lawsuit today, this was actually yesterday, I think, to try to enforce their election-related subpoenas against Maricopa County. And what originally happened here was the Senate of Arizona and the Judiciary Committee, they wanted access to the Dominion voting machines. A lot of lawsuits going on in Arizona, and they've been very aggressively trying to do a forensic audit of all of the equipment. Well, they delivered their Senate subpoenas over to the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. There were several hearings they went through. We talked about them a little bit on this program, and they decided to take no action on that. So one government body served another government body with subpoenas. The second government body said, thanks, we're not doing anything about it. So what they're doing now is they're filing a lawsuit in court here in Arizona in our Superior Court. And they had oral arguments this afternoon. So the parties had until 2 p.m. today to brief their jurisdictional and standing issues, and then they're going to have oral arguments today at 4 p.m. So we don't know what happened there, but we do have a copy of the lawsuit. So this is what it looks like. It was filed in the Superior Court for the state of Arizona in and for the county of Maricopa, and this is what's called a special action complaint. A special action is an interesting sort of legal maneuver that you can, if you're in litigation on a certain case, you can file a special action, which will sort of take you out of that case on that particular issue without resolving that case. So think of it, it's a little bit different than an appeal. An appeal would be like you completed the entire case, you lost your case, and you want to appeal it to a higher level court. A special action is sort of when you're in the middle of the case and you want to appeal an issue. Let's say you had a bad ruling, you have a disagreement about how something should be settled in the lower level court, but you want to appeal that up because you can't move forward with the lower level case until that special action issue is resolved. So that's what we're talking about here. And let's go through some of the lawsuit. It says, as the locus of the sovereign lawmaking power in the state of Arizona, the legislature is invested with expansive authority to issue compulsory process in furtherance of its investigatory functions. So they're saying here, the legislature has the power to issue subpoenas. They're allowed to do it at any time. They issued subpoenas. They served them on the respondents. They wanted them to make available for inspection certain physical and electronic records relating to the casting and tabulation of ballots in the November 3rd election. They have refused thus far to furnish any of the requested documents. This relief is necessary to make sure that they comply with the fully valid and lawfully issued legislative subpoenas. So they're saying, according to ARS 41-1151, that they're allowed to do this. They're the legislature. They have the ability to issue subpoenas. They did issue them. A secondary government body, the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, has refused to do anything about it. We go back to the lawsuit. They're saying that Karen Fawn is from Legislative District Number 1. We got Eddie Farnsworth. We got the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, and they're charged by law, the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors is, with conducting the elections within the county. And then they have to certify their results, prepare the ballots, and all of those different things. The subpoenas were drafted in consultation with President Fawn. They determined that there were widespread concerns with voter fraud that warranted a comprehensive independent investigation by the Judiciary Committee, which is to include a full forensic audit and tabulation of the tabulation devices and other voting equipment in Maricopa County. If the audit is completed, then they want to transmit a new official canvass to the U.S. Congress in advance of its January 6th deadline to certify or reject the Electoral College results. So this needs to be done quickly so that they can get that stuff certified and sent in. They want to ascertain the accuracy and the authenticity of the Maricopa County election returns. They issued subpoenas on December 15th. Both subpoenas were properly served. It demanded that they produce these things here. What do they want? They want a forensic analysis of ballot tabulation equipment together with related software, hardware, and removable media. They want voter rolls, voter records, paper ballots, other materials, recordings reflecting the casting and tabulations of the ballots. It was all served, and they just haven't done anything with it. So we'll wrap up the lawsuit here. I think it's our last slide. See what we got. It says here, they want a writ of mandamus. Okay, let's take a quick look. Yeah, the demand for the relief. So here's what they want. They want a writ of mandamus or other order requiring the respondents to immediately produce or make available everything that we just talked about. They want an award of attorney's fees, and they want any other relief that the court deems necessary. This was served, it looks like, 2 days ago on December 21st. So that's what's happening in Arizona. We're going to see what the court has to say about it. Is the court now, think about this, is the court now going to say that the legislature doesn't have standing to perform a legislative duty, right? They have authority to issue subpoenas and do their investigations. What's the court going to say about it? Is it going to be a standing problem? Is this going to be a mootness problem? You know, are they going to say that the state already certified their results? Therefore, you can't even, what are you doing? You're too late. It's game over. We'll see. Apparently they had oral arguments literally probably that just finished. So we'll take a look after the program is over and update you next. We have Ryan DeLucci, who says, love this show. By the way, pardon the somewhat off-topic chat, but I'm curious what you think of Better Call Saul. You know, very, very interesting super chat there, because you said the word pardon. I thought it was going to be a pardon question, but now we're talking about Better Call Saul, which I happen to love, by the way. I love that show. I think I'm not up to date on it. I think there's a new season that I've missed, or I think I missed maybe season 4. I watched several of them. I was a huge Breaking Bad fan. I love that universe. The characters are so brilliant. I think it might be like in the top 3 shows that I've ever seen. Breaking Bad was amazing. Better Call Saul, also very good. Not exactly how things are as a lawyer, which is fun. It's kind of fun to see. There are some other shows that I think have a better portrayal of it. Actually, not really. Most shows are pretty bad about portraying lawyers. Like Suits is hilarious. That's also not a bad show. I've watched a lot of Suits, but that's not what being a lawyer is like at all. Would be would be a lot more exciting if it was, though. Thanks for the question. Good question. We have Brooke Pelton who says, really appreciate you. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Brooke. I appreciate you back. Thanks for being here and for supporting us. We have Sharon Quidney who says, I've heard some speculation about Mike Pence maybe not accepting the Biden electors. Please comment. It's a good question, Sharon. You know, I've seen some of that. I have a hard time believing that Mike Pence would do that. And I don't really have any other good reason other than just sort of my interpretation of how he acts in the public light. You know, he's kind of mechanical, very, very disciplined, sort of, you know, kind of orthodox. He's not somebody from what I have seen of him who's going to go, he doesn't color outside the lines. Let's just say that, right? He keeps things on the tight and narrow, and he's very good at it. I think he's got some pretty big ambitions for, you know, running for president. I think he'd be a very strong candidate in 2024 if Trump doesn't have another term. And so what is he going to do is in my mind, I think he's just going to play the safe role. I think he's just going to do everything that has been done previously, and I don't expect any big fireworks. The bigger issue to me is what is Trump going to do in response to that? Is Donald going to excommunicate him or not? Right? I don't know. I hope not. And I hope, you know, if there is a basis for Pence to do something, I think he'd probably do it. But I'm not sure that that's going to be the reality. We'll see. We have Don Atkins. Good question, Sharon. We have Don Atkins who says, since Congress and the Senate will only vote on raises for themselves, how can citizens bypass them and get an amendment for term limits for them? 35 states ratification. Yeah, a constitutional amendment is a hugely tall order. I mean, you have to think about that, right? I think it's 3/4 of the states have to confirm it. 2/3 in both houses, and then it's ratified by 3/4 of the states. I think that's right. And that's a big order, right? When's the last time we got 2/3 on anything? Oh yeah, we just did on a spending bill and on a defense bill. Okay. The Congresspeople, they're not going to vote on limiting their own power and their own terms, unfortunately. I think that they should. I'm really tired of these politicians who've been in office for 37 years and produce almost nothing and then become elected president. It's very tedious. What can we do? We just have to start with individual candidates, right? And maybe start locally. Maybe have a state, you know, a local amendment that prohibits or implements term limits and see if that catches wave and then bubbles up to the federal government. I would very much like to see that. But a constitutional amendment is a tall order, and for good reason, right? We don't want the Constitution to be amended every which way. I would like to see, I'd be open to a constitutional amendment on term limits. I'd be open to a constitutional amendment on protecting commerce. Something like that, something similar to what we have in the Bill of Rights that protects commerce, protects people's ability to engage in capitalism, to engage in, getting a job, building a business, going outside, interacting with other people. It's kind of insane that we have to even talk about protecting that, but we do now because there's a lot of precedent in place that says you can't do those things anymore. And the courts around the country have confirmed that. Governors in Arizona locked down a bunch of stuff. We had somebody who runs a gym here. It's actually, I can't think of his name right now. It's killing me. And he filed a lawsuit. All the courts said, well, the governor has essentially total power because it's an emergency. He can shut down whatever he wants. We're seeing that across the country. I think that power is way too overbroad. I don't think that should exist. I think that, this was a, quote, emergency. I'm not trying to downplay the severity of COVID. Okay, my family was hit pretty hard with COVID. I get it. It's a real thing and it's a big problem. That being said, total dictatorial lockdowns across the board that don't even address the problem, those should be unconstitutional, and I would be on board with never seeing this happen again. We have Wolfgang Deo, who says, don't need to read all 6,000 pages, just find something that is really bad. Oh, here it is. If it were simply funding, no laws, I would pass it because it seeds U.S. dollars. Yeah, so... Okay, so I understand your point there, Wolfgang. I think that part of the problem here is that a lot of this money was going out of overseas. Some of the other stuff, like I was very critical of this wild burro and horse program, whatever that is. But at least that money is staying in the United States. Apparently, that's in Arizona. I didn't even know what it was. Somebody sent me a message on Twitter. Thank you for that, telling me what the BLM program was. I was like, the BLM program. We've talked a lot about BLM on this program. But I don't know anything about a BLM horse and wild burro program. The hell is that? And they said, no, it's the Bureau of Land Management. Oh, okay, that makes sense. So that money is staying in the United States. It's staying here, which at least you can say maybe there's a multiplier effect, right? If we give $10 million to the wild horse and burro program to do Lord knows what with wild horses and burros, well, maybe that creates some jobs. Maybe those people spend that dollar that they earn from the federal government buying a horse. They got to feed the horse. They got to, buy the hay and whatever it is that horse people do. And, that also will stimulate the economy. Like those you can at least make an argument for. What we're doing by sending $10 million to Pakistan for gender programs, I don't know. Somebody else sent me another email saying, well, maybe that's for gender issues in U.S. troops over in Pakistan or something like that. It's like, okay, that sounds to me like a bit of a stretch, but what do I know? We have Wolfgang Deo who says Trump added rhetorical pork to his speech. That is a great point, Wolfgang. There was a lot of election pork in that speech. If Congress is going to do it, why can't Trump do it? We have Car Connection Online says, hey, Rob, I'm sending all my cars in a convoy from New Jersey out to your office to start a rally to support your channel. Keep up the great work. Thanks, Car Connection Online. And hey, man, let's do it. I'm on board. We'll round up the office. We'll get our cars and we'll just go and we'll rally for America. I'm on board for that. Check out Car Connection Online. And it looks like he may have a nice channel over there with connecting people with cars. So check that out. Thanks, Car Connection. We have Kenneth Fielder in the house who says, hello, I find it disturbing that other places are getting more benefit than our own people. I can appreciate some stuff, but when we have places in our own country having problems, that needs to be addressed. Another pass, no read. Exactly right. And I think, I think the American people are sort of figuring that out because this, once again, if there was some time to talk about it, if there was an ability for the American public to read the bill and decide what they like and what they don't like, and even pick up the phone to call your representative and say, hey, this is a garbage bill. There wasn't even any time. There was literally 2 hours, according to AOC. That's not my numbers. That's her numbers. She posted it on Twitter. She said we had 2 hours to read this stupid bill. They did it. They voted for it. It's now done. So the people who are working for you, the American people, don't even care what you have to say about this. They just pass it. Then when you're pissed off about it, when you blow up Josh Hawley's Twitter, when you blow up Lindsey Graham's Twitter, all they do is just say, you're right. Shucks, you're right. They're stuck in the Senate for another however long, 4-year term, 6-year term. They're good. They know that this is all going to blow over. So it's just like, the mob is angry again. Okay, Emperor, the mob's angry. Well, why don't we just set up some fights in the Coliseum? We'll let them just go enjoy the bloodbath. They'll forget about it by next month, which is largely the case, right? We're probably not even going to remember this a month from now because we'll have a whole new set of problems, once again, caused by our government that doesn't really address anything that the country itself needs. They don't want to send this money overseas, or they want to send it here, but they want to fluff it up so that they can all get their cut of the grift. Really shameful. We have Rusty Shackelford who says they are playing with Trump. The bill also stipulates the Insurrection Act cannot be used to contest elections. I did see that, Rusty. I saw that was kind of slid in there, right? They can get all sorts of stuff into the bill, but Section 230, something that really does, I think, need some reform, that doesn't make the bill. Maybe instead of 2 hours to draft and read this bill and consider voting in it, maybe they take 2 hours and 10 minutes and they throw a Section 230 in there. Maybe that would be useful. But remember, they're all bought and paid for by the big tech companies. They know that if they even hint that they want to do something meaningful, now don't forget, they're all going to call them in and do their committee hearings with Dorsey and Zuckerberg and Sundar over at Google. But nothing is going to get done. They literally show up to Congress, lie through their teeth at all these Congress people who don't know any better because they're octogenarians who have no idea what a like button is on Facebook. So they slide all this stuff in, but they won't actually address anything meaningful. Thanks, Rusty. Appreciate that. We have Pinky says, thank you, Rob, Faith, Ma, and anyone I left out. You guys are wonderful, and I love your show. Merry Christmas. We love you back, Pinky. Thank you for that. Thanks for the support and the Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas back to you. Hope you enjoy it. Hope it's nice, healthy, safe, and you eat a lot of food and celebrate the meaning of the season. Appreciate it, Pinky. We have another one from Wolfgang who says, amend the Constitution to declare disabled from birth peoples as protected. If you want to help a disabled, sure. However, we know how to get by without help. Okay. Good. All right. Thank you, Wolfgang. Appreciate that. We have Death API who says, He also said remove the bloat. They are ignoring that, right? And that's the other part of this. If the bill were $2.4 trillion and all of that money were going to American causes and we knew where it was going and, everybody was going to be better off as a result of it, it's hard to be upset about that, right? It's our own money and we're sort of one country. We're all on the same team here. Even though the country's largely pretty divided right now, we all want to help our fellow man, I think largely. But when you have this just, buckets of money that nobody can decipher, they cram it into 5,000 pages, they vote on it in 2 hours, I think it's just indicative of corruption and grift in ways that I don't even know what the response is from them, right? And they all have no response. The Democrats are saying, yeah, see, we told you so, $2,000 a month. Okay, that's not exactly what we were talking about, okay? We're not just talking about bumping the 600 to 2,000. We're talking about throwing out all of the other garbage, all of this other pork that's in there. That's a part of Trump's statement. It's not just like turning the dial up on the stimulus part. This bill is garbage. In addition to the 2.4 trillion that you're siphoning off so that you can all make money off of your, corrupt bargains, you're also ripping off the American people. So it's like insult plus injury plus insult. It's very, very insulting across the board. Kenneth Fielder, who says, happy holidays. Combining Christmas and a New Year's, a history lesson is needed for them. True history. My sister is $3,000 behind on rent due to no work caused by, quote, lockdowns. State is Oregon. Yeah. And so this is where I think Rand Paul is missing the mark just a little bit, right? He's saying, hey, my son's working. They don't need any money. They don't need $600. They don't need $2,000. Well, Rand Paul's not, has he been to Oregon? Okay, I don't know what's going on in Oregon. I know a little bit about what's going on in California just from the headlines, and I think they're still on massive lockdowns. Arizona has said no more lockdowns. Florida has said no more lockdowns, but other parts of the country are locked down pretty dramatically. What are those people doing? Sorry to hear about that, Kenneth Fielder. I hope she is able to work her way out of it. A lot of sympathy for people. The federal government telling you, the state government telling you that you can't do certain things is a huge assault on liberty in every which way. And if the government's not going to compensate you for taking that liberty away, if the government came and took your house away, it's called eminent domain. They're allowed to do that. They got to pay you for it. And the Supreme Court has said it's just compensation. The federal government can't come in and say, we're going to take your home and we're going to give you half of market value because that's what we think it's worth. The courts have said, no, it's just compensation for the taking. Go read the taking stuff. It's a big problem when they start telling you that you can't do things that are sort of inherently, innately a human right, which is your ability to go out and live your freaking life. They're telling her she can't do that. They should compensate her generously for that. And if they can't afford it, then open the country. All right, thanks, Kenneth. We have Neil Anderson who says, citizens arrest, citizen arrest. Is that for me? Come and get me. We got a whole defense attorney firm here. Okay, we have, thanks for that. We have Renee Markoff who says, where the bill says Americans, does that include Central and South Americans? Yeah, good question, Renee. I don't know. Yeah, I know. We can just say, or you could even say just like North Americans, right? North Americans. So Canada gets some money, Mexico gets some money. Who knows where the money goes? That's part of the problem. They don't want you to know. Did you see how they put it in there? Not less than this amount for this country and, $700 million to the Sudan. Okay, well, how's that going to get broken up? Are there some additional bills that detail where that goes? Or is it just like somebody just cuts a check over to the Sudan for $700 million that is then divided up? How does that work? Nobody knows. I don't know. I would guess that Congress doesn't know. But they voted on it anyways. Who's paying for it? That I do know. It's you and it's me. We have L4G Custom Fabrication who says, what about teen girl who got jailed for breaking COVID rules? Yeah, those are also very good issues, right? These are new laws that are being passed into place. They're going to start criminalizing this stuff, as apparently we see here. I think it was a misdemeanor in Arizona to not wear your mask. It's ridiculous. You're just criminalizing everything that we do. Every single thing that you do. Chris Anchondo says they didn't spend the money they took from us. They went straight to the Federal Reserve and printed more money from their basement. 35% of all dollars in circulation right now were made in the last 10 months, which is another great point. It's a highly detailed sort of economic argument that not only, so listen, you have to pay your taxes, right? You're getting taxed to death. Just taxes, taxes, taxes everywhere you turn. You buy a candy bar, you got to pay taxes. You stay at a hotel, you got to pay taxes. You pay your water bill, taxes. Fill up your car with gas, taxes, right? Hop on an airplane, travel taxes. Income taxes, local income taxes. You got taxes for everything. Getting ripped off everywhere you turn by the government. And what are they doing with that money? Well, they're sending it across the world to other countries. They're also just printing a bunch of it. They can't take enough money from us. So they got to print a bunch more of it. What does that do? Well, it decreases the value of your dollar. Because if you have $10 in your wallet and somebody just prints, $2.4 trillion, that same $10 doesn't have the same buying power because it was diluted by $2.4 trillion, plus another, $900 billion for for the Defense Authorization Act, plus another whatever in entitlement spending, plus another, it's never ending. So every time they print more money, the value of your dollar goes down. So you're getting screwed both ways. Not only are they taking the dollars from you, but they are depleting the value of the current dollars that you have anyways. So they're going to leave you with some money, but they're going to diminish the value of that by printing a bunch more. So pretty neat. We have another one from Gian Briat, who says, Trump said he'd pay us $2,000 and get rid of the foreign pork. Why are we paying for gender studies in Pakistan when we cannot pay rent? It's a good question. Well, maybe you should move to Pakistan and question your gender. Maybe you'll get a chunk of that money. Thanks, Jan, for that question. We have Andrew Borth, who says, I agree. This last-minute budget stuff gets very old. I support peaceful resolution. Don't name bases after traitors. Yeah, I think it's a pretty reasonable argument, right? If you won the war, you get to name the bases. You don't name the bases after the people who you just defeated. The problem here was that we defeated sort of our own brethren. Right, they were part of our country, and I think during the Reconstruction era, there was a good amount of effort that was made towards reintegration. Right, we want to reconstruct it. It's not going to be like the same thing, after World War I, when there was a lot of animosity, rightfully so, towards Germany. There were a lot of really hard restrictions that were placed on the German people. They were really punished for starting World War I. Well, what that caused was a lot of resentment, very angry, which led to a very angry populace that nominated somebody who took over the country, led to World War II. And we didn't want that to happen back during the Civil War. We wanted to reintegrate our brethren. And so I think some of that was probably just recognizing that, they have a good basis for what they did, right? And I'm not advocating for slavery, but I think many people who were Southerners at that time it was predominantly slavery was the main issue there, of course, but we're also talking about sort of an over-encroaching federal government, I think, is what many Southerners were feeling back during that time. Anyways, what happened was they wanted to reconnect the country. And I think by giving them some token naming rights of some bases and sort of glorifying some of those leaders, it was a good tool to sort of satiate a lot of the animosity that was taking place in the South. Like I said, I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't care what the bases are called. It's sort of irrelevant to me. I don't even know why Donald Trump included that in the explanation for it. I mean, he should have known that this was going to be the talking point from the Democrats. This is all they were going to talk about. Why are they not talking about bringing the troops home? Well, because that looks good for Donald Trump. The renaming of the Confederate bases doesn't look so good. So they're only going to talk about that stuff and not anything that would put Trump in a positive light. We have Wolfgang Deo, who says, a current Section 230 use is national security threat because domestic actors are weakening and attacking American ideals and the Constitution. Domestic actors. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I can see your point on that. And I think that's sort of the same point that I was making, that when you are allowing tech companies to consolidate their power and control the narrative of what's happening in the country, that's concerning. And right now, they are literally protected by the government against liability. You have no ability to sue them because they're protected. Even though they're acting like publishers, they are saying what you can and cannot post. They're putting contextual little, bubbles everywhere you go. Even Donald Trump was censored. That's troubling, especially if we want to live in a country that has free speech as one of our founding ideals. It's not too good. We have Kenneth Fielder, who says Section 230 needs to be removed since they are being more like publishers as opposed to platforms. Yeah, it's exactly right. Right? They are telling you what you can and cannot post. They are censoring information. They are curating what is allowed on their platforms. If they want to curate that, well, then they're responsible for being a publisher, just like the New York Times is. Okay, the New York Times won't publish something that is defamatory or that doesn't go through their editorial checks. If they do, they're subject to certain degrees of liability, right? Because they're a publisher. But Facebook escapes liability, even though they're acting like a publisher. We have Andrew Borth, who says, I am leftist. Challenge isn't dangerous. Talk of bringing guns to the inauguration. Revolt, that's dangerous. Yeah, I would agree with that, right? And if you've been following the channel, Andrew, I've been saying that for a long time here. I do not want to see violence. I do not like this concept of civil war. I don't like the idea of bringing in the military. You know, I think that we want to live in a civil society, not a military society. We don't want to live in a place where we're in the middle of a civil war. So I would agree with you. I don't typically like that language. We have Wolfgang once again, who says, Luke Air Force Base has jets constantly above my house, /sarcasm. I will fight if it turns to Mark, /sarcasm. Confederate soldiers fought to protect their home, not racism. Yeah, and that's a good point too, right? You know, there were people down there who were thinking that their way of life was being trampled by an overarching federal government, and they responded in kind. So I'm not sympathizing with slavery. Okay, let's make that point clear. Wolfgang Dale, another one, says Warner is a national security threat. He had forced a good bill to be the NDAA, then Trump wouldn't have to veto it. Military has ammo, all is good. Yeah, you know, look, I think the military is going to be fine. They're going to pass a bill anyways. The military is ultimately going to get funded. What Trump is doing here is largely symbolic, and I think it's necessary and important. Congress is not going to do anything about Section 230 on its own. People have asked about that before prior to this veto, and I don't have any faith in Congress to do anything here. I think that the tech companies are too powerful. I think they're more powerful than Congress in many ways. It's a different arena a little bit, but they are more powerful because these Congresspeople know if they anger the Google gods, if they anger the Facebook lords, their next campaign is going to be difficult. If Google just moves the knobs around a little bit and shuts their ads off, or favors the algorithm that spams, when you search their name, spams all of the negative articles about them. It's very, very powerful, and they know that. That's why they're not doing anything. We have S. Love, who says there are Chinese propaganda groups that are allowed to spam social media that is CCP friendly while Americans are silenced. It most definitely affects our life here in America by hurting the sheep. So there you go. That's a very good point, right? What if these foreign entities are using our own social media to execute their will, and our social media companies are protected against lawsuits, they're protected against liability, so they're almost like a safe harbor for foreign interference in our country. That is a national security risk. I think S. Love, that's a good argument. Thanks for sharing that. We have another one from Helen Alera, who says, if the alleged election irregularities in 6 states are proven true, the person who certified the election, can they be criminally charged? Probably not. I don't think so. Ultimately what you'd have to do is look at each individual state and see what those laws are on election fraud or, those types of claims. And obviously I'm not up to speed on all 6 of those states. If you wanted to make that argument, you would have to show in criminal law, when we start talking about in general terms about 2 different types of, or the 2 requirements to be successful in a criminal claim. If the government's going to bring a criminal claim against somebody, you want to harken back to your old criminal law days. There are 2 elements that you need. You need what's called a mens rea, which is a mental state. So you have to find somebody that has a guilty mental state. It's called it's mens rea. What are they thinking? Do they have a guilty mind? The other component is what's called actus reus. So it's an act. So you need a guilty mind plus an act. So you'd have to find something like that in each one of those different states, and then you'd have to connect that to the person who certified the election, whether that's the Secretary of State or the governor. They would have to have really one of both of those. They would have had to have had some sort of a guilty mental state, and then had done something, some sort of action, an actus reus, that would fit the criminal statute in a way that would lead them to criminal liability. Probably a very long stretch. I think that they all are going to have a valid basis, or at least a good rationale for why they certified the election. They were relying on these underlying reports and so on. So it's a good question, but I don't think that it would be something that you can expect to see. We have HTS 2105, who says, can Mike Pence refuse the electors given the fraudulent election? There was a trend on Twitter called Pence Card and thought it was interesting. So good question, HTS. I don't think so. Okay, I don't think so, because we read the rules here. We went through literally line by line, and Pence's role is largely ceremonial from our reading of the interpretation, our reading of the statute itself. Essentially, the way that it works is Mike Pence is delivered a box of the certificates of ascertainments. He opens them, he hands them to a number of tellers, they open them and pull them out and then count them and then tally them, and they give him back the final numbers, and then he reads the numbers, or he announces in an official announcement that is when the next president is elected, is officially elected. That's when Congress accepts the results. And if you want to watch how this works, you can see Joe Biden doing this for Donald Trump. You can actually go on YouTube, look at January 6, 2017, and you'll see Joe Biden, and they're going through this exact ceremony. We played the video on this channel, and it's largely ceremonial. So, the objections, I think, would need to be made by the Congresspeople and the Senate. So one congressperson, one senator, that's enough to object to a state's electoral votes. They would go off the floor, have individual debates, come back, and vote as a body as to whether or not to decline those votes. I think that is the really clear mechanism. The idea here that Mike Pence, while he's counting the votes or making the announcement, is just going to say, I'm not going to read this in, or I'm not going to do something, or these are Pennsylvania's votes, I'm not going to hand those to the teller. I just don't see that happening. I don't think Mike Pence is that type of a politician, but we'll see. We have another one from Liberty or Death who says, wow, January 22nd, SCOTUS really is interested on ruling if it is okay for a state to violate Article 2 and a state court to violate Article 4, shadow docket. Yeah, January 22nd. So, we'll see what happens, but obviously that's a little bit late. Might be good to get some answers on what the Supreme Court has to say about, the Constitution, the executive branch stepping all over the legislative branch, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the judicial branch, just taking a big problem thing all over the legislature. Nobody really cares about it. The Supreme Court, this is where we need them. They're asleep at the wheel. We have Matthew Riley who says, when I run in 2026 and 2028, can I use your live stream intro as my campaign? Judges not interested in justice, etc. It's like the perfect campaign slogan. Matthew Riley, you got it, my friend. Use it away. Use it to your heart's desire. It's one of those things that is sort of hard to say. It's kind of a stark reality when you start to realize, okay, all these people are really self-interested. They're not particularly interested in justice and problems with prosecutors and so on. It's yours, my friend. Take it and run with it. We have another one from Wolfgang Deo who says, my mom just said, give the government the vaccine first. If it works, they are safe. If it doesn't, the country is safe. There you go. I like that. Your mom is very clever over there, Wolfgang. We have another one from Eagle Eye Gardens who said, today's meme. So what you were saying is that if I put in my $600 stimulus check in a Dominion machine at 4 a.m., I will get $100,000. Great show. Thank you. That's a good one, Eagle Eye. Yeah, I like that. It's a multiplier effect. $600, for you, but, or maybe if you're going to be getting the stimulus check, you just get it under, I could get it under Rob. I could get a stimulus check under Robert. I could get another one under Robbie, which my mom still calls me. I could go for Bobby. I could even go for Bob. That's 5 stimulus checks for me. Okay. Not a bad deal. I'm not endorsing that. Okay. Don't come investigate me for that. We have Aaron Seavey who says, in Arizona, will a person be told if a grand jury was convened about them and found in in AZ, will a person be told if a grand jury was convened about them and found in the person's favor? Also, great job with the show. Big fan. Thanks, Aaron. Typically no. I mean, so here's how it works, right? A prosecutor is served with something. So it's a great question, and there's a lot of nuance in here. If you have an attorney and you're under investigation, yeah, we'll know that. Okay, because what we'll do is we'll contact the prosecutor's office. They have what's called a pre-charging bureau, and we'll say, listen, we know that you're investigating our client. He's hired us immediately. We want to be apprised of everything that's going on. And even during the grand jury proceeding, there's a thing that we can do to get involved if we want to. It's called a Trebus letter. And what that means is that we can write a letter that we are asking the prosecutor to present to the grand jury on behalf of the defendant. And so we can go in there and we can, say, listen, we know you're going to present this evidence. We've got some alternative facts. We're basically challenging the probable cause finding mechanism that takes place during the grand jury proceedings. If if you're somebody who has a grand jury being convened about them and you have an attorney, or at least a good attorney, then we would know. And if they declined to, so let's say, for example, we sent them that letter challenging the probable cause, the prosecutor read it and said, all right, those are pretty good explanations, pretty good facts. You're right. There's no probable cause here. I'm not going to convene the grand jury. We would know about that. If it did go to the grand jury and they presented our evidence and the grand jury found that there was no need for an indictment, then we would know about that. We would communicate that to our client. But if you were just a random average Joe person kind of bubbling around your life and you had an interaction with law enforcement and you went home, in Arizona, you can file felonies 7 years later. This happens. So you can go home 5 years later. You can just get a summons in your mail. You can have an officer come to your door. You can have, a number of things can happen. And you may not ever know that a grand jury proceeding maybe took place 2 years ago. They declined it. There was maybe they did another one. They have some new evidence. They bring new charges, and they can kick the case around for a long time. You may not ever have any idea. And so to answer your question, yeah, they could have convened a grand jury, found that there was no probable cause, end of the case. You don't even know anything about it. It's possible. So it can go a number of different ways. A little bit in the weeds there, but it's a good question. Thanks, Aaron. We have another one from Rob Guyette, who says, if Trump ends up leaving, I hope he lets it all out. JFK, UFOs, Jimmy Hoffa, all the dark secrets we can speculate on. Totally agree, Rob, on that. I want Area 51. I want it. What is in there? Is it really like Independence Day? Do we have the aliens floating around in the vats of goo? I want to know. I'm with you on that. Thanks, Rob. We have Curtis Bartle, who says, Georgia is doing a signature audit to come out tomorrow. If it shows fraud, then what? Good question, Curtis. My understanding is they're doing it in Cobb County, which nobody had any problems with in Cobb County. Most people were concerned about Fulton County, but they chose Cobb County. I listened to a little bit of the Georgia hearing today. There was a legislative hearing that took place. Brad Raffensperger was on, and then there was another attorney from the state of Georgia that was on, and then it was very, very boring. It was a lot of people just congratulating themselves about what a great job they did. Everything was ridiculous. All of these things are conspiracy theories, a lot of disinformation. Brad Raffensperger was saying that all of the people who were talking about fraud, like Newsmax and One America News and all those, new sort of right side organizations, he was saying that they're all having to issue retractions. Basically, everybody who was saying that there was fraud is totally wrong. There's no smoke there. Don't worry about it. And it was just like that, one after another after another. Couple good questions from some legislators, but nothing that I heard. I listened to about 45 minutes, maybe 60 minutes of it today as I was doing some show prep. Nothing really stood out for me. So, I don't know what the signature audit is going to show, but if they were doing it in a county that nobody cares about, it's probably going to come back clean as a whistle. We have Aaron Barth, who says the deep state is a myth. The establishment is the depth of a dollar. Interesting take on that, Andrew. Yeah, I think I think you're probably onto something. The idea that there's like this secret shadow government that's sort of running things. I think that largely people are interested in money and their own careers. And when you have a lot of people who are doing that, and you bring in a Donald Trump who's going to shake up the cart, who's going to just rock the boat a little bit too much, you're going to have a consolidated, coordinated effort to get that abnormality out of the system. And many people have just sort of, I think, labeled that collusion of efforts as the deep state. So I do think it's valuable to put labels on things just so we know what we're talking about. Is there, one secret mastermind like George Soros, running everything with puppet strings? Probably not, but he doesn't need to, okay? Because he's in the oligarchy, he's in the ruling class, and their interests are all aligned. They want to make more money. They want to secure their power. They want to establish generational wealth. They want to, do the things that the ultra wealthy want to do. And since they all want to do that, their interests are going to be in alignment. And anytime somebody comes and shakes the apple cart, they want to get that person out. We have Debbie O, who says Pakistan women's funding. They explained that women in Pakistan can't even have their own bank accounts without husbands. So it was somehow for Pakistan, not the U.S. Okay. Yeah. So there's some interesting things there, right? I said this yesterday. I support helping people. I want the world to do well. I don't want, Pakistanis to be suffering. I don't want anybody to be suffering. But can America cure all of the world's ills? No, clearly not. We can't. We can't even do it here in our own country. So until we can in America, the rest of the world has to hang on. Sorry. All right, we have Sammy Elliott, who says, what's the situation in Arizona arrest warrants? It's a good question, Sammy Elliott. It's a very broad question. arrest warrants are typically issued if you missed your court date. It's kind of the most common way you get it. So if you get pulled over for, let's say, a speeding ticket, it's a criminal ticket for something, driving on a suspended license, or a DUI, or you get, arrested at an Old Town Scottsdale bar and you miss your first court date, they're going to issue a warrant for your arrest. If you get stopped again in the state of Arizona, they will just arrest you and take you into custody. So warrants are not a good thing. It'll also suspend your driver's license. Arizona will notify everybody out of state. So Arizona communicates to all of the other states and says, we suspended his license. So if you came to Arizona, got a warrant and left, eventually it's going to catch up to you. All right. We have another couple here. Looks like one from Dave Smith says, cool right back at you there, David. Thanks for that. We have Brian Reinhardt who says $835 billion of $905 billion of the bill is foreign aid. Wow. Ridiculous. I don't know if those numbers are accurate or not, but it's a lot. We have TZ1052NY says it seems that with the election law, seeing a lot of subpoenas or judicial orders that are ignored. Alito, how can we make change when they are the law? Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it's something I've said a number of times here that I think has to happen locally. You have to get your local representatives involved, make the changes locally, and then see those bubble up to the federal level. If the Supreme Court is not willing to take action, that's just out of our hands. I mean, there's basically nothing we can do about that. Right now they have life tenure. Unless they do something that is not good behavior, which is what the Constitution says is the standard, they're going to be in office until they retire or they die. We got to live with that. Unless Joe Biden wants to pack the court, maybe he'll add a bunch of justices who are better to our liking. Somehow I doubt that, though. Thank you there, TZ. We have another one from Neil Anderson says, citizens arrest. That's for the government, not you. Yeah, so I see. Okay, so thank you, Neil. Appreciate that. I will sleep soundly tonight. But I can see your point, right? If some of these government officials are not behaving themselves, can you conduct a citizen's arrest? Don't think that would work out, but I appreciate the idea. Another one from Wolfgang says, of course the legislature can issue subpoenas. If they couldn't, how could they possibly make good laws without evidence that guides their decision? Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason we give them the power to do that. Right? They need to go investigate things before they can make a policy about what to do about an election. They got to know how the election was run. Right? It's a co-equal branch of government. They say, we don't think you did a good job on this thing. The executive says, yes, we do. The legislative says, okay, if you did, show us. Let us see. Open up the books. Let us take a look. They come back and say, no, you can't do that. Now we got to get the judiciary involved to see if they'll come in and help clear some of this up. Not holding my breath on it, though. Rich Lawrence with a nice little super chat there, no question. We have JCI Global Ministries who says, is democracy working in the age of big data and AI? Anything and everything can be made to seem right. It's a very interesting question. This is pretty deep there, JCI. It is curious. We're sort of seeing sort of this bifurcation of the world, the different realities in which we are living. And this was very evident, I think, during the lead up to the election. I saw some poll, I don't remember what the number was, so don't quote me on it, but something like, 40% of the American public never even heard about Operation Warp Speed. They had no idea that even was a thing. Right. And that was, in my mind, one of Donald. If you're a vaccine person, and I'm not particularly, I haven't decided I'm going to take it or not. I'm going to talk to my doctor and make a decision. I'm not particularly worried about it because I'm young and healthy. But let's say you are a vaccine person and it's going to really work and save a lot of lives. I'm all in favor of that. Seniors, people with comorbidities, high risks, all of that. Right. He got the vaccine done in like 9 months. 9 months. All of the experts, every single one of them, including Joe Biden and everybody, all of the Faucis and everybody was saying this is like an 18-month thing at the fastest, at the absolute fastest. It's going to be 18 months. Usually it's more like 4 years, 5 years. Trump got it done in 9 months. It's out. It's going around the country right now because he's not a scientist. He's an executive. He said, get it done. I don't care if it takes 18 months. Get it done in 9. Cut it in half, right? And I can appreciate that. Now, half of the public, something like that, didn't even know that this existed. So they're living literally in a different reality. They're living in their own little world. And they're saying the same thing about the other side, right? They're saying anybody who's challenging the election is living in their own reality. They're conspiracy theorists. They're just living in their own little world. And AI and big data, they're responsible for that. So it's a good question. It's a good pertinent point. I think it's going to be more and more relevant, which is why Donald Trump is so angry about Section 230, I think, as we all should be as well. We have Vivian Summer, who says, could it be possible to make the stimulus bill public? Some of us can read. Love the show. Yeah, I think it is public. Is it not public? I think I downloaded it at some point. Did I? I probably didn't open it. The issue here is I'm not going to read 5,500 pages either. So we were just trolling around on Twitter to see what people were finding and clipping. But I would imagine it's available. I think you can get it somewhere. Thanks, Vivian. I would also encourage you, don't read 5,500 pages of government documents. I mean, you can if you want, if you got nothing else to do. But it's already passed. It's kind of a done deal. We'll see what they do to change it. But Congress didn't read it. Why should you read it? Thanks, Vivian. Appreciate the support. We have Cable Box, who says, Merry Christmas. Thanks for doing all that you do. Thanks to you, Cable Box. Thanks for being here. Appreciate the support. Merry Christmas right back at you. I'm glad you're here. We have Ray F., who says, am I missing something here? Why isn't anyone in power stepping up when we're at the risk of legit CCP rule? Am I overreacting? I don't think so. I really don't think so. China is an interesting entity for sure. I think that there's a lot of indication here that they're gobbling up a lot of property. They're gobbling up a lot of politicians. They've got a very, very vast, massive, cyber warfare infrastructure. They've got, I think, still the world's fastest supercomputer. They've got some pretty detailed plans on how they want to become the sole superpower of the world. There's a guy by the name of Peter Zeihan, absolutely brilliant. I love his work. He did this synopsis on global power. I think he did a seminar from 2019. He did a new one in 2020. He talks a lot about the global order and how Donald Trump is sort of shifting American foreign policy largely because we don't need the rest of the world anymore. And if you read some of his work, he is not particularly afraid of the CCP. He says they have a demographic problem there. Essentially, they're not going to be able to sustain themselves at the current pace under the current structure of their country. So if you're concerned about the CCP, take a look at Peter Zeihan. His name is Peter Zeihan. Very, very interesting work. Very, 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 very good presentations. Stuff that is easy to follow, and he breaks it down. And so, if you're concerned about the CCP, look to him. He'll give you some good news. We have Lauren Robinette, who says Rockbridge Co. VA has Time Warner founder bought lots of land, CARES Act, all programs, and VMI highest ranker removed, progressive spider webs everywhere. A refresher that we regrettably have red hen. Okay, so there's a lot in there. I know these messages are hard to type because you have a character limit. Rockbridge Co. VA has Time Warner founder bought lots of land, CARES Act, all programs, and VMI highest ranker removed, progressive spider webs everywhere. A refresher that we regrettably have red hen. So thanks, Lauren. It's going to take me a little bit to decipher that, but I recognize some of those issues. I appreciate your support. Sorry that I can't decipher that better. I apologize. We have Polo Up, who says C19 new Vine is unsafe and people should not take it. Oh, so the vaccine. Okay. Thousands of doctors have come forward and are coming forward warning people, but have been censored. An example is Carrie Madej. Yeah, the COVID stuff is tricky. I'm not a doctor, and I'm going to talk to my doctor about it. I'm going to talk. My uncle's a radiologist. I'll see what he has to say about it. I'll just kind of do my education on it and then make a decision about it. Like I said, I'm not in any particular hurry, but there are people who are in higher risk pools who I think should, really consider it because we don't want them to die. So I would encourage everybody to do meaningful research. Don't take anybody's word for it. Certainly don't take CNN's word for it, right? They've all got agendas. You want to make sure that you're listening to people who have your best interest in mind, not the government, which I think it's a stretch to think that they have your interest in mind at all, quite frankly, especially this year. All right, we have Rich Lawrence, who says, can they delay the debates past the 2 hours, forcing a contingent election delay tactic? Yeah, that is one of their tactics. We saw from, I think it was Representative Mo Brooks. We talked about this yesterday a little bit, Rich. We were detailing the Republican plan, and what they were saying they wanted to do was get, I think, 75 House members to do 5-minute speeches. They all get 5-minute speeches. So if you do the math on whatever that number is, it's like 12 hours of speeches. It would delay the session of Congress from January 6th to January 7th, or just create a delay that they wouldn't be able to carry it over to January 7th. So they would have to go and force a vote. I think that is the strategy. So we'll see how that goes. More and more Congress people are joining in on it. I saw a new person today. I'm not sure who it was, but if they can get up to 75 people, they all get 5 minutes. It's 12 hours of debate. Per the rules, they got to vote at some point. We'll see if that happens. Denise Rosselyak, who says, I think the lockdowns are emergency room availability dependent. Emergency. We got a winky face. Yeah, so I definitely understand that. I think that there's probably some truth to that. The lockdowns are sort of a rolling wave, right? They're looking at capacity in the ICU and all that stuff. But I think one of the issues there, again, I'm not a doctor, but aren't ICUs usually mostly full, right? Like they don't have a lot of extra capacity. You know, hospitals don't just have hundreds of rooms just open, lying around empty, just like anything, right? Like we don't have 10 employees here doing nothing that we don't need, right? It's to save costs, it's to save equipment, it's to save expenses. And so, you know, this idea here that ICUs are like 80 to 90%, well, what are they normally? Are they normally at 10% or are they normally at 60%? It's a pretty big difference. And a lot of people just don't know what those differences look like. Thank you, Denise. We have Wolfgang Deo with another one who says, by giving out money indiscriminately, I keep my US dollar value in check. Thus, funding at this moment does not help much discrimination, or does not need much discrimination. All helps. Okay, so it sounds like Wolfgang is doing the reverse of the federal government. So they're just giving money out. Wolfgang's giving money back. How do you like that, federal government? Thanks, Wolfgang. We have Polo Up, who says the new COVID-19 vaccine is unsafe and people should not take it. I think we already covered that one. Let's see. Yep. Already got that one. Thanks, Polo Up. We have ASO Rexino, who says, U.S. people, in my opinion, are facing a great choice. Be weak and do nothing, or fight hard for the future of your republic and the free world at large. Be strong. Don't let fraud win. Merry Christmas from Poland. I agree with you on that. You know, I think that this is a good moment in time for people to get a little bit more plugged into the political system and to say, look, these are the values that we stand for. These are the things that we think are most important. And we expect this from our politicians. If this is sort of a tipping point in many ways for a lot of people. And I think it's good to be plugged in. Some of the language about, insurrection, martial law, civil war, that I think that's a fight that is unwinnable. I don't think that is in the interest of anybody. But certainly getting plugged in, voting, supporting candidates, building a men's group or a women's group of people who, get organized and champion causes and maybe raise some money for good candidates. Run for office yourself. If you're on this channel and you think about running, run. Goodness, why not? Right? Look at these idiots in Congress. Can you do a better job than them? Yeah, of course you can. So, get plugged in, get involved. We have Jay Mill, who says, I say this having little knowledge of how lobbying works or to other ways money is funneled to individual congressional members, but would love to see how much money is being pushed from big tech to certain individuals. Yeah, I'd like to see where the money's going just around the board, right? Who is getting funded by the big tech companies? And remember how they do this, right? It's not going to go directly to a candidate because there's federal spending limits on those individual candidates. But if we had real journalism, if we had an actual journalist whose job it was to go and investigate these things, don't you think they could figure out how much money was going from Mark Zuckerberg to any one of these, PACs, organizations, political action committees, any one of these, sort of dark money groups? What is really going on here? We hear about George Soros all the time, and we all kind of feel like it's a problem, but nobody has really untangled the web of money and influence. It'd be very interesting to see what that looks like. We have SSW Lamb, who is chiming in. He says, hi, Rob and Miss Faith. Not hopeful that the election will be overturned despite all the fraud. Beep. Keep up the work that you do. Thank you. Thank you, SSW Lamb. I appreciate that. Fraud word, got to be real careful with that right now. But I think you're right. I think it's a little bit of a long shot right now. It's going to be very interesting, regardless of what happens. I think, the country is going to keep moving forward. We're all going to be just fine. It's going to be a good 4 years of getting involved, staying active, holding the government accountable, wishing for the best. I certainly don't want to detract from America. I don't want the country to fail, but at the same time, I don't want to live in Joe Biden's vision of the world. I don't want the darkest days ahead of us. Okay, we had a really rough 2020. I think that we have this thing mostly under control. I think better days are ahead of us. I would have preferred a leader who was in alignment with that vision, but we didn't get that. That's okay. We're going to have to hold him accountable, his administration accountable. We're going to do a lot of that here. Absolutely. We're going to have some fun doing it, and we're all going to be okay. Thank you for being here and for the support, SSWLAM. Really appreciate it. We have Christy Anthony who says, how were the cookies? They were pretty good. I started with the Patriot cookie, obviously. I tried the Orange Man, and I will tell you this. The Patriot one is better. Thanks for asking, Christy. And let's go over to HTS again. We have a couple more. We have HTS 2105 who says the shadow government and the CCP come together to take out America via cyber warfare meant to divide us. Linwood said we are at war now. Thoughts? I think that is probably true. Okay, I think that warfare is now going to be digital and cyber. Truthfully, I think that's the case. I understand the sort of old idea of what military conflict looks like. I'm not a military expert, right? But I just don't see a way where two countries start bombing each other and somebody wins. I don't know that the world is in that position anymore, right? Unless it's like the U.S., bombing Iraq or whatever that is. A big country versus a smaller country, that is something that I think will still be foreseeable. But let's talk about, the U.S. versus China. How does that work? If the Chinese launch another Pearl Harbor or something like that, let's say that happened. I know they didn't do it. I know it was the Japanese, but let's just say, for example, right, China initiates a first strike against the United States. Well, what happens? A U.S. city gets vaporized. The U.S. responds in kind. It's the end of the world as we know it in that type of war. Let's say it's much smaller, right? So we don't start nuking each other, but it's a much smaller scale conflict. Well, the U.S. cuts off trade with China. We don't buy any Chinese products anymore. What happens to China? Well, China exports a lot of their products to the United States. They have nobody else to sell to. The Chinese people revolt. That's the end of China. So what interest does China have in initiating something with the U.S.? Probably very little. Does the U.S. have any interest in really initiating a full-scale conflict with China? Probably not, right? Americans love their cheap garbage from China. So are we going to see sort of a boots on the ground, shooting, bombing war? Probably not. I think that we're really trending towards this cyber warfare. We talked a lot about this earlier in the week. I think it's maybe even last week about the CISA and the SolarWinds hack, and that is warfare, right? If they are in our nuclear energy department, if they're in the Department of Treasury, if they've got data that's in the Department of Defense, that's warfare, folks. And who's behind it? We don't know. So that's what I think we're going to see a lot more of, probably right in the middle of it right now. Who how do we know? Who's going to tell us? Is the government going to tell us? Probably not. We have another one from Wolfgang Deo. My slide is not switching. There it goes. He says, if you print money and let it sit, then it loses value. However, if you put it into a place that creates work or energy, then you make the value more. That's a great point. And I think that's pretty good financial advice, right? If you take a bunch of money and just shove it under your mattress, it's actually going to lose value because the government just seems fit to print $2.4 trillion anytime they want to on 2 hours notice. So the money does nothing. Might feel good, might feel safe sitting in your bank account, but why don't you do something with that? Why don't you educate yourself, buy a book, get a coach, elevate your skill stack, do something that improves your life, invest in something else, create something, then turn that $1 into $2. We have S. Love who says George Soros paid off many DAs in Democratic-ran states. You have Zuckerberg spending $400 million on local politics. Christine Fang slept with politicians. Very suspect. Yeah, that's true. And we were talking about this before the election with all of the pre-election litigation that was going on. We were specifically, Priorities USA was funding the Retired Association of the Retired People Association, whatever it is. I have a slide on it from 2 months ago. And where does that money come from? Who is funding these big organizations to go and enact these lawsuits and then conduct the elections? Love to find that out. Probably have some pretty good answers there. A lot of stuff that I think a lot of Americans would be pretty disgusted by. Thanks, S. Love. We have another one from Wolfgang Deo who says, oh, and people argue about the subject matter of the statutes and stuff. What about the artist and the craft? Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. If you have a former general who was a strong advocate for slaves and you have this nice big marble thing about him, I'm not real sure that people are going to take much interest in the crevices and the beauty of the sculpting. Probably just say, that guy was a jerk, and they want to pull that statue down. We have SSW Lamb who says, President Trump doesn't get the recognition for the work he has done. History will be kinder. Luckily, Trump has stood up to the CCP. Totally agree with that. I think Trump's outward-facing persona has been very off-putting to a lot of people. Never was off-putting to me. I like, direct, strong individuals, especially for president. I don't like a bunch of quislings who say nice, fluffy things, but don't actually do anything of consequence. Okay, think about the things Donald Trump has accomplished versus the things Barack Obama accomplished. He got 2 terms. Trump's probably going to get 1, but Trump did, in my mind, 10 times as much as Obama ever did. That's just how this country works. All right, we have SSW Lamb who says, big tech, big government, and the media equals the Orwellian state. Stay strong to the good people of the U.S. and fight for freedom. Merry Christmas to you all. Merry Christmas to you, SSW Lamb. Really appreciate it. You're a regular here, and you have good, insightful comments, and you support the show, and I really appreciate that. I wish you a very, very Merry Christmas, not only to SSW Lamb, but to all of you, everybody who's here. We have another last one from John Sullivan, who says, Trump supporters don't care about the GOP and Pence and others better not just play along. If they want to get reelected, Trump supporters will primary the ones not standing against the far left and the Marxist. I agree with that, John. A lot of the Republican establishment here is saying that, well, Donald Trump is really hurting the Republican Party. I don't care at all. Not even a little bit. Don't want more Josh Hawleys, don't want more Lindsey Grahams, don't want more Mitt Romneys, don't want more of any of those idiots. They don't do anything. They're basically like Democrats. They're exactly the same, except for a couple differences on policies that don't really matter all that much to most Americans. You sort of have really horrible fiscal policy from both parties. You have really horrible sort of international relations, like both are largely advocates for war, both of them. And the only real distinguishing difference, which is just enough of a little bit of the red meat to just keep, the peasants, meaning us, right, arguing with each other, are things like, transgender issues and, all of these things that people get really fired up about, but affects like 1% of the population. Okay, maybe less than that. We all fight over these things, right? Social issues get people riled up, but do those really impact all of our lives? Probably not. Most of those issues just don't. Okay, most of us want to live our lives. We're all taxed. Okay, we all are paying for wars. We're all paying for this foreign aid stuff. And the Republicans, if they're not going to change course, if they're not going to support the issues that we care about, who cares? Get rid of the Republican Party. I don't care. Not even a little bit. So, all right, my friends, that is it for me. It's a little bit of a long one. We've got 2 hours and 20 minutes. Woo! All right, so let's wrap it up right there. I want to thank you once again for being a part of the program. I want to remind you to subscribe. If you're not already subscribed, we go live every day of the week at this time. We want you to be a part of that. We'd really appreciate a like, a thumbs up. It helps boost our videos. Google and YouTube have kind of put us in this little bit of a bubble because we talk a lot about the election. They don't want us to do so much of that, but we're going to continue to do it. We're going to follow their rules, play on their playground. But if you could, give us a little bit of support, that really helps us show up in the recommended videos, the suggested videos, and things like that. So we'd very much appreciate it. Another reminder, the slides are going to be in our Discord server. The link is in the description. You can get a copy of them there. You can also get a PDF of my book. It's available in there for free. You don't have to pay anything. If you want to get a hard copy, it's available on Amazon. This is what it looks like. It's called Beginning to Winning: How to Fight Your Case and Succeed in the Criminal Justice System, written by yours truly. It's really for people who've been charged with a crime. There's a little bit about me and about my philosophy sort of at the beginning of the book. If you find it helpful or useful or entertaining, would really appreciate a review over there on Amazon. That would go a long way. Be forever grateful for that. Also, It is the holiday season. Sometimes things can get a little bit hairy in your life. If you know anybody in the state of Arizona who has been charged with a crime, we would very much appreciate a referral, because that's what we do. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. We have an awesome team here at the R&R Law Group. Very, very good at what we do. We only do criminal law. We're quite good at it. Been doing it for some time now. And so if you know anybody who needs good representation, or even just needs to talk to somebody, a free consultation, no problem at all, send them our way. We'll take very good care of them. We'd be honored to receive a referral from you. Other than that, my friends, a little bit of show programming notes. Not going to be here tomorrow or Christmas. I know. You saw my mom. She's got stuff planned. I got to go do it. I'm a good son, so I got to go and do the family stuff. But we will be back here next week. So many people are taking kind of a long holiday break. We're not going to do that. We'll be back here next week on the 28th, and I expect to go all through the week. So I know next week is New Year's, but I think we'll be here for that. Don't have any mom obligations on New Year's, okay? I'm on my own. So I expect to be back here the entirety of next week. We want to have you here and join us along and be a part of the broadcast. So one more time, hit the subscribe button. Other than that, I will not see you until after Christmas. So I want to wish everybody a very warm, very loving, very happy Merry Christmas. If Christmas is not your thing, happy Hanukkah, happy holidays, whatever it is you enjoy to do. Celebrating with your families is a good time of year for us to just kind of pause a little bit, reflect about what this year meant to us, the reason for the seasons, being grateful for the good things that we do have. We spend a lot of time on this show talking about some of the frustrating stuff, the stuff that really kind of grinds all of our gears, but we have a lot to be grateful for. We still live in a pretty great country. We have a lot of freedoms in spite of what the government is doing. And, we want to take a moment to just pause and reflect on that. So I'm going to be doing that. I would encourage you to do the same, or at least, spend some time with your family, love up the people who are important to you in your life. We'll get back to beating up on the politicians, the judges, the prosecutors, and the cops shortly, starting next week. So I'll leave you with that. Everybody have a very, very, once again, very, very Merry Christmas. Please be safe. I'll see you back here next week. Until then, my friends, bye-bye.